Airport information, Mike. Wind at 320 degrees at 6, temperature 5.
Strip's where I'm gonna land. Only the word is crash.
Hey, and welcome to the big show. We're here with our man Dynamite David, and we're back on the air. Football season's getting ready to kick off. Soccer season is getting ready to kick off. Sports are getting ready to kick back off. And so it's up to us here to preview college football, NFL football, soccer. We're going to change the format a little bit here and just talk sports, all sports, so we can sort of do all our sports. We will still have our pick show coming in every week, both college football and NFL. Dynamite David is going to join us with his NFL picks this year, so it should be a fun year. We're going to break it all down. We're going to do a format here where we're going to talk starter conference previews in college football. We're going to go over Conference USA and the Sun Belt Conference. We're going to start our NFL preview. We're going to start out with the NFC East. Then the Premier League starts in a week. So we're going to give our future bets on the Premier League, preview the Premier League a little bit. And Ligue also kicks off. I know the Dynamite isn't as familiar. I'm not as familiar. I know about 8 teams where, but definitely Premier League. Yeah. I got a couple bets in Ligue.
PSG is good.
PSG is good. PSG to win is always the safe bet here. But we'll come to that. We'll have our picks every week. Probably solo picks. Weekly once the season gets started. Maybe we have one or two where I can get my stuff done early. But
just whatever we're feeling week to week.
But, you're an early betting man, and I'm a late betting man.
I like getting those early lines.
So we at least don't have to rush into anything, and you can have your stuff ready early, and I can have my stuff ready late when I'm sort of ready to bet. But let's kick things off with our college football preview, and let's start out in Conference USA. Not much of a conference.
Yeah, a lot of departures.
A lot of movement going around. A couple of subdivision teams moving up here. Sam Houston, Jacksonville State, two pretty good subdivision teams. So,
along with Independent Liberty.
And Liberty moving from the Independents into Conference USA here. So should be a...
might not fill all the holes that they lost with Charlotte and... Florida
but I
Atlantic,
think, a couple of those teams, like I said, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, have been good subdivision teams. They sit in good recruiting bases as well, so they should be able to get the talent up there. But the subdivision teams won't be eligible, so it's a very, very small conference.
7 teams eligible to win, I believe.
And really only about 2 good teams that I think really even has the talent to even compete at a high level. So I guess let's get started and start off with the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers here. Win total sits at 8.5. I know you've been big on Western Kentucky the last couple years. Last year they started out slowly, but picked up steam and really finished out the conference season really, really well. They look like the class here, definitely. What do you make of Western Kentucky here?
I mean, you're going to get what they've given you the last few years. Really good offense. Their defense was slightly better last year, which led to their 9-5 year. Created a lot of turnovers with their defense. They lost. I think they're only bringing back 4 starters on defense this season, but they bring back their starting quarterback, their starting running back, most of their starting wide receivers. So expect a lot on offense here. They're the favorites for a reason. I don't like the juice at just even money basically to win the conference. So maybe a little bit better than I think it was like 3-1 last I saw to win the conference, which isn't that great considering you've got Liberty there and plus other It's going to be interesting to see what we get from all these teams across this conference with the teams leaving and the teams coming in. it's year to year. It's going to be really hard to judge the win totals here because we're not sure how these teams are going to fare against these others. But I think the big, besides Liberty, Western Kentucky is probably the biggest known commodity returning this year. I think, and that win total at 8.5 is probably right on par. I think they can get that just simply because the talent discrepancy this year versus last year.
Yeah. Well, we knew last year when we Western Kentucky really had a murderous schedule. It seems like they've scaled that back at least a little bit here. Ohio State's still on the schedule. It probably, to go from I want to say 10-win team to what they were last year, a 9-win team, really hinges probably on that South Florida game. They should be able to win that offensively. South Florida still struggles a little bit to find their form from 10, 15 years ago. So maybe they could climb to that 10, maybe 11-win schedule. I don't think they'll have any problem in the conference here. They were 6-2 last year. I look for that to be matched. Really, you're looking at maybe at Louisiana Tech on a Thursday night. That's a difficult game, always going into La Tech. Liberty comes to them, but they're a team with equal talent. I don't really see much in conference that would trip them up. So do you think they can get to 10 or 11 with this offense? Because I think it's 2 years in a row because you've been on them.
I've made a little bit of money on them the last couple of years.
They've started so bad, but then once they hit conference play, they've been so good. Can they start good and finish good this year?
Yeah, and even road game at Troy, that could be difficult. Troy had probably one of the best defenses in the...
That was my big money win from last year. We'll get to them in the Sun Belt. Not getting the same odds as last year.
Not to get too far ahead here, but yeah, and I'm really excited. I talked about this with you earlier, the midweek schedule.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to getting in some Conference USA with my Maction here. We're going to get a lot of Tuesdays and Thursdays, especially in that October
You'll have to follow the Dynamite on Twitter for those.
A lot of midweek action in Conference USA, so I'm excited for that as well.
Definitely. Let's move on to Liberty here, the team moving from independent in here. A lot of money, pulls a lot of talent. Definitely new coach Hugh Freeze leaves, makes his way back to the SEC. Chadwell takes over here from Coastal Carolina. Honestly, probably a coaching upgrade if you're asking me. I don't know if everybody would believe that, but I watched both coaches. I like this Coastal Carolina guy. I think we all know I'm not a huge Freeze guy. They definitely have talent because they get a lot of transfers. They have a lot of money. In Conference USA, I think they're the biggest school. I think they have an enrollment of about 44,000 people. So this is easily the biggest school in Conference USA. Yeah. But I think other than that year, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when they sort of surprised people and then sort of made it on everybody's map, I think they've been disappointing basically every year, including last year where I thought they were pretty disappointing as well. Can they jump into Conference USA and sort of not be disappointing this year?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jamie Chadwell. I thought this was a good acquisition. I'm still kind of shocked. You said it was money. I think it was kind of a lateral move in my opinion. I don't see a real step up in program, but interesting to see if he can bring in his...
Well, I think we'd say Sunbelt probably a better football conference than Conference USA right now, even with the additions.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's just Liberty's been kind of promoting people more, and I don't know. I thought he'd built something really good at Coastal, and could have moved on to something bigger.
And you're on the beach in Myrtle Beach,
and could have moved on to a bigger program from there. But we'll see. We don't know exactly how much money he's getting.
Yes,
I'm interested to see how quickly he can implement his offense in here. It's slightly different. It's more disciplined than what he was running.
I think that's just a life lesson.
So we'll see. I mean, it is a good offense, but I don't know if it'll be immediate year one success, maybe year 2, 3. So that's why I think another reason why Western Kentucky is so heavily favored this year in the conference. So I think the schedule's, definitely a lot easier than what Liberty's used to with the conference changes because they lost a lot of the tough guys out of the conference. So I definitely think it's a 1-2 punch between them and Western Kentucky. That's why their win total's sitting at 8.5 as well. But not so certain on the over there as I am Western Kentucky. I could definitely see an under 8.5 here for Liberty.
I agree with you there because I think we've seen this team disappoint playing teams like Bowling Green and Buffalo who are on their schedule. Certainly at Buffalo will be a difficult game. I'm assuming Bowling Green coming there. They can probably pull that out. But I think Bowling Green, both you and I, surprised us the year before when we thought they were terrible, and then all of a sudden they were contending out of there. I'm like you. I'm curious how their offense will, if they will be able to come right out of the gate. Like it took Coastal a couple years before they started really, really flowing. So I wonder if he can sort of get them going or they start a little slow. Don't have a lot of returning starters. Now, we'll start now by this day and age. That doesn't always mean a ton because the transfer portal.
And Liberty's a hub for the transfers too.
It's, it's remaking veteran players. They probably need to, on these sheets now, having players experience than, returning starters from your team because you just hit that transfer portal and you might get a guy who's been playing 2-3 years at some other school coming into yours, which isn't necessarily a returning starter for you, but is a guy who's going to hit the ground running.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious, but if we were doing a tier system, I think out of Conference USA, it's Western Kentucky, Liberty, and Line.
Yes, for sure.
And then we'll probably just go through the next couple schools, which always seem to be a wild card. We try to guess them every year, and either they overachieve or underachieve. And I think the poster boy for that will probably be Middle Tennessee State.
Yes.
Because I think they overachieved and underachieved all in the same season last year because they had a big upset last year, but then proceeded to just melt every game past that. I don't know if we qualify quite the University of Miami being a big upset, but certainly they didn't have the same talent, but put a lot on them last year. Their win total sits at 6.5, which sort of seems about right because I think you just don't know what you're going to get.
Well, I think you're going to get a drop-off from last year, but I think they also benefit greatly from the departures in the conference. I think, they could make that move from the middle of the conference team to the just near the top tier. Like you said, I think they could be right below. They could be the top team below those top two guys on the line. But, you never know with Middle Tennessee. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what we get. Maybe they can make a jump and get up there with Western Kentucky and Liberty. Like I said, I think Liberty could regress some this year, and this is the first team you look at behind that line. But starting off with two SEC teams is always tough. You got to refocus once you get into conference beyond that.
Definitely so. Rick Stockstill has been there for
forever,
basically my whole adult life.
He may be one of the top tenured coaches in college football.
He's been there forever. I wouldn't call him like a great coach, but he's pretty solid. He runs the program. Middle Tennessee could be a bottom tier program, which they certainly aren't that. They usually play pretty solid football. They can occasionally pop up with an upset, but they also occasionally pop up and disappoint and get an upset. So I think that's why that number sits at 6.5. I'm curious to see how they handle this Conference USA season. Plus 700 to win the conference. It might be a little worth it because, half the two of the teams in this conference aren't even eligible to win it. You might be able to sneak through if Liberty disappoints.
Yeah.
But
the major games you look at the Liberty, the Western Kentucky, and New Mexico State. And I think Louisiana Tech's a bit of a 50-50 there. I kind of got them in the same boat. But if they can upset one of those top Liberty or Western Kentucky, they'd be right there. I think they're definitely going to get wins over a couple of the newer entries, FIU maybe. So it's going to be close. I think you're probably looking at anywhere from 4-4 to maybe 6-2 in the conference, maybe. but it really depends. Western Kentucky could run the table in the conference.
That's why if you have a Western Kentucky and Liberty pretty much running the table, 4-4 probably is more likely. I don't know if they could climb to that 5 because they're due a letdown somewhere, and that sort of always hurts them. But maybe a little value there at the 700 to win the conference. I don't think if they got in a conference championship game, they'd be able to handle Liberty or Western Kentucky. But we'll move on to the next one. New Mexico State. I don't put them in quite the same tier as Middle Tennessee State. Their win total is the same level, 6.5. The basketball team is the one who's been having trouble, but the whole athletic department at New Mexico State's been a pretty big mess. I think that spills over into here. I will say Jerry Kill is there, but I've loved him at Northern Illinois. I liked him when he went to Minnesota. He does have the seizures thing. I think that has to factor a little bit because you never know when that's going to kick up, and then he has to go away, and that could totally fall off a cliff. They did win 7 games last year, but they played a really, really weak schedule.
Yeah.
This one starts out a little bit weak, but I respect the coach. I don't respect the program, I think, is where I sit with New Mexico State.
Yeah, if I've got a lean here, under the 6.5 is definitely my lean. But, last year they started out 0-4 and then finished the year 7-2 to get 7-6, and then even got a bowl game win over Bowling Green.
Yes.
Strong finish.
We all tuned in for that bowl game.
So I don't think we can count out New Mexico State, but I don't see them having as high upside as say, a Middle Tennessee or, heck, even maybe a UTEP or Louisiana Tech. I think these guys, like you said, this second tier, it's so gray between Middle Tennessee and these next 4 teams. I could see it going either way, but 6.5 I think is a little strong. It'll really come down to if they can sweep the newcomers. I don't think they can beat Liberty, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, they were an independent last year. They're the other independent moving in, and you mentioned that they started 0-4, where they started playing. I wouldn't say good football teams, but solid to okay football teams, and then that back half of their schedule got really, really light. They sort of scheduled it so they could win.
It's kind of the reverse this year.
A handful of games. I'm interested as they move into a conference and face some teams in a conference where they don't have scheduled wins. You might look at Massachusetts and Western Illinois scheduled wins, but I don't think you ever mark down scheduled wins for somebody like New Mexico State.
That's true.
Doing that is a little dangerous, and then the schedule gets pretty rough. At Liberty, at New Mexico, at Hawaii. That's 3 really, really tough road games by. Then you're in your full conference slate with, an Auburn sitting in there. So
7 games on the road, too.
Yeah. That 6.5 does not speak to me all that much. Am interested to see if Jerry Kill can grow this program, but I'm not quite as sold on New Mexico State here. Let's move to Louisiana Tech. This would be the other team I'd probably jump into the tier with Middle Tennessee. Yeah. Really, really bad year last year, but, it's like I said, they sort of, every time you think they're down, they pop up with a 7, 8, 9 win season. Every time you think they're going to have a 7, 8, 9 win season, they have a tough season like they did last year. Still pulled off a couple wins at home. They're always dangerous at home. And a solid program with a solid recruiting base. Sonny Cumbie's in his second year here. I think that offense will start to come around this year. So I think there's a little potential with this team here. Be interesting how they look after a tough year last year, but I kind of like Louisiana Tech. They would sort of be my sleeper in Conference USA if I was taking one off the group that isn't Liberty or Western.
Yeah, I'm definitely liking the over 5.5 here. I think this is another team that can benefit from some weaker teams moving in and some stronger teams moving out. 3-9 last year, really struggled, kind of fell below where they normally hang out in the conference. They're normally in and around where Middle Tennessee hangs out. And I think they can get back up to that level again this year. So I think 5.5 is totally doable. I'd say anywhere from 6 to heck, even 7 or 8 wins.
I think they could climb to 8. Certainly if they get hot in conference.
Yeah, this schedule's definitely a little bit more feasible than, I actually like theirs better than New Mexico State's.
Yes.
That's why I think that it's interesting that their over-under is lower, because I think this Louisiana Tech team could be right there. It could even go up to, say, 3rd in the conference behind Liberty and Western Kentucky.
Well, I think it reverses a little bit where we were talking about New Mexico State joining a conference and having a difficult time, whereas I think sort of the weakening of Conference USA might benefit here.
Yes.
Louisiana Tech, they might get some cheapy wins that they didn't get last year when Conference USA was pretty good last year.
Yeah.
With UAB, with UTEP, a couple of the other Texas teams, Western Kentucky. I mean, I wouldn't call it a great conference, but there was enough top-heavy teams.
UTSA,
UTSA, where they couldn't just walk in and get wins. I think a lot of these teams, they can walk in and get wins, certainly at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could arguably say that Conference USA is probably the weakest of the FBS teams this year.
Definitely so. All right, so let's move probably to our last sort of tier, and then we'll get to the sort of bottom one. UTEP, I sort of liked them last year. They did hit their over win total. We're not as successful. I thought they'd be more in the 7-8 range, but their win total last year was 4.5. Got that 5. I'm having trouble sort of judging this team. A lot of people return. They may be ones that benefit from sticking around in this conference where it gets weaker. But they weren't as good as I thought they'd be last year. I think the coach, I don't want to say on the hot seat because it's UTEP. If you win 5 to 7 games, you're probably okay. But I'm interested what you think of this UTEP team because I was pretty high on them last year. They did disappoint me a little bit, but a lot of those people I was high on last year are backs.
Well, this team started 6-1 last year, but then really limped to the finish to finish 7-5. But none of their wins were over a team with a winning record. None. Now, they do benefit this year. They got 15 returning starters, but they finished the year with Western Kentucky, at Middle Tennessee, Liberty.
Yeah.
I think that's loss.
I think throw in even that at Sam Houston, which is sort of a battle for recruits for those two. Sam Houston will be wanting to sort of move themselves above UTEP in the Texas sort of pecking order for those second-tier recruits.
I think 5.5 is strong on the over for the win totals. Not strong for the over. I think that's too strong to hit that over. I think you're actually probably playing it safe going under there for sure. I mean, you've got definitely 3 non-conference losses.
Yes.
And then, heck, Incarnate Word's been really good in the subdivision.
Wouldn't put the Incarnate Word. I know a lot of guys transferred out, but they are a program with money and has had success. So, granted, Northwestern might not even be playing their season. So, that might have to be a fill-in.
So I think they could fall to the bottom of, like I said, this gray area in this second tier of Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State. I think they could fall to the bottom of that grouping.
I'm curious here. What do you think, before we get to the bottom tier teams, we've seen it in the MAC where it gets a little crazy. What do you think the sort of home road thing will do to these Conference USA teams now that they're playing Tuesday, Wednesday nights? It's fun watching the MAC, but it makes it a little difficult to bet because you never know what's going to happen if a good team is going on the road somewhere else.
And I didn't mark this down, and I should have, but I heard a nugget that there's a couple teams that are going to be playing about 5 games in a 3.5 week span because of this weird scheduling, which that could always factor in no matter how good you are. But I should have made note of that, and I didn't, so I don't have it in front of me, but we'll have to look at that.
Definitely. I think that's something to keep your sort of eyes and ears open during the week and sort of look at how many games these teams have played, because a lot of these teams may be solid in the starters, but that's where they sort of drop off once you have to start putting second, third string guys in there. The drop off becomes really, really, really big.
Yeah.
I think we're dropping a tier here. I think the two subdivision teams probably a little better than some team, much like we talked about last year when James Madison moved in. Mm-hmm. We'll start with Jacksonville State. They've always been a good subdivision teams where a lot of the Florida, Alabama, Louisiana second tier sort of recruits go to either rehab their image or just transfer down a level from Division One. So they've always been a pretty solid program. Rich Rodriguez takes over here. So I think this team could have a little life to them. Of course, they're not eligible to win the conference, but sort of like James Madison, I think there's a handful of games here where they could cause some trouble. Definitely so. I think Rich Rodriguez sort of got lost in the shuffle here, but I still respect him as a football coach, certainly offensively on that side of things. Yeah,
I'd say in this conference, one of the, definitely the most experienced coach in the conference and big time school experience. Yes. Returning 16 starters on this team. We'll see how they do in this conference. Got a pretty good swing game against UTEP to start the conference play out in week 1. But good offense, what you expect from Rich Rodriguez, but I'm not sure, with the road game at Coastal Carolina, at Middle Tennessee, pretty much losses, I think, Liberty and Western Kentucky at home. Can they get more than 2 or 3 conference wins? I don't know.
No, I was thinking this might be one where they could sneak up on one of those middle tiers. Louisiana Tech coming there late in the season might have a difficult time. The UTEP game's early, so that I think will be difficult, but they might catch them off guard too. Whereas I think UTEP would be smart enough to know, but you never know. But at New Mexico State, difficult place to go, certainly in the winter, but I think they can maybe, I'd look for them more to start slow and then maybe their close a little bit. FIU, South Carolina wash, but Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State, those last 3, there could be a possibility where they could go 2-1, and that where the record would go 4.5, 5. It probably sits in and around right around that number.
Yeah,
I don't think I'd be aggressive going either way.
I think they're a bit of a wild card.
Yeah, I probably would hint over if I was forced to make a bet on it, but you just never know how these teams will transition, how they'll hold up with injuries going through. But I certainly think this team will be well enough coached and have enough athleticism, certainly to here in Conference USA. We're going to go to FIU. I think this will be the worst team. Granted, Mike McIntyre takes over. This is like rehab Conference U for a handful of these coaches. I liked Mike McIntyre as well, but ever since he sort of bailed on San Jose State, he's sort of been floating around. Hasn't found his footing again since then. I just don't think this team will be very good. They were really, really bad last year. I look for them to be really, really bad once again. The only thing I can say is they've been in this conference. They know this conference. Maybe they can creep a couple wins here. It's difficult to go there, certainly early in the year when it's still warm and teams are having cramping issues and stuff like that. But I just don't think there's a lot of talent.
Yeah, FIU, I think, is going to be the team that these newcomers, Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State, they're going to have FIU circled on the calendar as opportunity for a good win. And FIU could fall to the bottom of the conference. They were tied for 9th last year, only 2-6 in the conference, and it could get worse this year. I don't know. Potential to go winless in the conference. 2 years ago, they did go winless in the conference. Improved a little bit last year, but I don't see it at all. I'm seeing maybe 2 at most 3 wins. I still think the under 3.5 hits.
I also think their early schedule at Louisiana Tech, Maine, who is a subdivision team, but also is probably one of the top ones up in the Northeast. Now, they aren't very good, but I don't put that as a runaway. North Texas will murder them at Connecticut. Connecticut played good football last year, if anybody remembers. Then Liberty, then a bye week, then at New Mexico State, then UTEP, then at Sam Houston. That's a tough, and things could start to spiral badly. And I think if that happens, then maybe they start packing it up and are not as gritty as
I don't see any.
to be.
I don't see any path to the 4 wins on the over here. I think the under is actually a pretty safe play.
Yeah, I would definitely. I'm not big on hitting overs or hitting unders on low wins, but that 3.5, that's 4. That's matching last year's. And
last year was a up year for them, I think, kind of.
I think it was a miracle they got the 4. So I don't see that. Next, we'll move to Sam Houston, the other one jumping in. This is a subdivision team which I think can make some noise. Can they do it right off the bat? I don't know, but this has been a good subdivision program, really, since I've basically been paying attention to football. They'll have good players. They'll have good athletes.
Great coach.
A good coach who's won basically at every division he's been in. Now, he's not known because he's been in the smaller divisions, but he's taken programs.
Yeah, he built a program at Delaware.
Yes. And he wins. And I assume he will come in here and win at Sam Houston. They sit in a great recruiting base. It's a pretty big school, too. It's a small school in playing subdivisions, but it's a big Texas school that I think will get players in there now that they're in Division I. I look for them to be a little bit of a sleeper. I think they can skip over that 3.5 win total. Aren't eligible to win the conference, but I think they'll be a good football team right off the bat. Last year, you told me they sort of redshirted a bunch of guys because they weren't eligible to be in those subdivision playouts. But the year before, they were one of the best subdivision teams in the league, and that's been a consistent thing for them for a very, very long time. Yeah,
they had a lot of talent on this team 2 years ago. They went undefeated in the regular season, knocked out in the semis of the playoffs. And then a lot of guys from that team redshirted last year, going to come back with a lot of experience this year and bringing back almost all the starters from last year's squad. I look at that 3.5 as very doable. I think this, they're going to be after FIU. I think they can get Kennesaw State. I think then you've got Jacksonville State, UTEP, Middle Tennessee as kind of toss-ups there to get to that 3rd and 4th win. So I think it's very possible, and a well-coached team that I think could quickly build to become one of the better teams in the next few years of the Conference USA.
Yeah, once they get off that sort of suspension to win the conference, I'm looking to grind them heavy pretty quickly. Kennesaw State comes in not this year, but next year.
Yeah.
And I think Sam Houston will probably end up working their way into being one of the top teams out of Conference USA for a pretty consistent amount of time, basically as long as Keller stays. If he starts winning, I don't know how long he'll be there, but he's had offers to move up, and he's always sort of hovered around there. So maybe he sticks around, tries to build that up at Sam Houston. But that sort of wraps up Conference USA. We'll move on to the Sun Belt here. All right, the Sun Belt Conference. Probably one of our favorite conferences. I think we've enjoyed talking about them the last handful of years, and I think it's no different again this year.
Yeah.
This is a loaded conference with a lot of good football teams. I think this is when I make my case for relegation, where some SEC teams should drop out and go to the Sun Belt, and a couple of these teams should bounce up into the SEC.
Well, definitely last couple of years with Coastal, and then the previous decade App State and a few other dominant teams.
It won't ever happen because of money, but this would be my sort of. I would be curious if Vandy got sent down into the Sun Belt, if they'd run right back up into the SEC or start dropping down in the Sun Belt as well. Anyway, let's kick things off here with our old friend Appalachian State. Interesting season last year. I don't know, the game that started you off on your bad streak.
That 60-something point shootout against North Carolina.
With North Carolina, then the next week they come around and beat A&M.
Beat Troy, too.
Beat A&M, then beat Troy on the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
I think you started out the year 0-3 on betting Appy State games. But
down year for them.
But down year.
Yeah.
But weird down year because basically they were in or around every game. I think they were up like 28-3 on Coastal and ended up losing. And
yeah, they lost a big comeback to Coastal, and they beat Troy, who went on to win the conference.
Yes.
So
they beat A&M. Now, granted, A&M was atrocious, but if you're going into A&M and winning, that's still something. I think they're going to be good, but will it be a little bit more the same, where it's sometimes they look great, and sometimes they look like they're giving up 400 yards a game? I will say I was never a big fan of Chase Bryce. I thought he was... Basically, they played how I watched Chase Bryce play, which is he'll hit a 70-yard throw like on that Hail Mary, and then he'll make 2 stupid interception plays. I think they might be a little bit more consistent and safe going through here, which will probably benefit them. But what do you make of Appy State this year?
Yeah, I think while last year was a weird year, it was a down year for them, and their win total's at 6.5. And the down year for them last year was 6. I think they're going to get over that. I think we're looking for a bounce back. They lost a lot of close one-score games. I know they did benefit from that some, but I think they're going to be among the competitors for the top of the East there. And I look for them in the 7, 8, maybe creep up to 9 wins. So I think the 6.5 is generous, and I like the over there for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That's 6.5 and the 850 to win the conference. Now, I mean, everybody's pretty big in this conference. I think money line wise, if you're betting to win the conference, because I think like last year with Troy, you could probably mark 5, 6 teams that theoretically could find a way to win this conference.
And James Madison's still ineligible, and that's one of the biggest competitors in that division.
But they also count for conference losses.
That's true.
If you play them, which Appy State was one of the teams that lost to James Madison last year. I look for a better team this year. I think you're getting a gift here with that 6.5. They very seldom have I seen this, even with the changes basically starting in, the late 90s, with coaching changes every couple of years because the coaches get poached. They've been able to always acquire talent. They sit in a pretty good spot there out of the Carolinas, in the Georgias.
Yeah.
They can, and even, the coast up there in D.C., Baltimore area. So they've always, I think the talent comes there. I don't think you go to Texas A&M and win like they did and not have talent. I think some things went wrong. So I'm really big on a bounce back sort of year. You mentioned it. I think they could be in that 8, 9, 10 win mark, depending on how sort of the ball bounces here. I really like this team, certainly. We'll move on to a team I think you liked last year.
Yeah.
Didn't start great, but finished pretty solid. But they were a little bit like Appy State, where you didn't always quite know what you were going to get quarter to quarter, mind you. But third year for Charles Huff, I think it's a little bit of a make-or-break year for him. He hasn't been bad, but I don't think he's been great, and they're pretty high standards here at Marshall. And I think they thought moving in to the Sun Belt, they were going to come in and just start taking names and plug-in conference title banners, and they haven't really been even in and around that. What do you make of this Marshall team this year?
Yeah, I thought last year was actually a bit of an up year for them, even finishing at 9-4. They were 5-3 in the conference. Had a really good defense last year. I'm worried that they're going to regress a little bit this year, simply because they've lost a lot of talent on defense. I think one of their guys transferred just recently after spring ball to go play at Alabama.
Yeah.
So you've got some good defensive players if Alabama's poaching your players. So I don't think we're going to see a repeat of last year. I think we're going to see a little regression. Their win total's at 7.5. Do they lose and drop below that? I think they're going to be kind of right along that line of 7, 8. I don't see more than 8. So I think more likely the under's going to hit. Just because I think they've got some tough non-conference games, and NC State's tough on the road.
I was going to say it probably depends if they can steal one of those at East Carolina, Virginia Tech, at NC State.
Yeah.
All winnable, but can they get one of those? If they can get 2 of those, they cruise past it. But
when you talk about their biggest competitors in this division, it's going to be Coastal and App, and they're on the road for both of those games. So it's going to be really hard to jump to the top.
They're at South Alabama as well.
Yeah, so drawing South Alabama out of the West there is tough.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious to see how they do, because they did sort of. You couldn't bet on them last year. I think you tried a couple times, and you never quite. You were like,
I couldn't time it right.
Yeah.
I think I was missing them when I didn't bet on them, and
they played well this week, and then it was like, well, they scored no points this week and lost the 13-6 game.
Well, they went on it and they beat Notre Dame on the road, and then lost like 4 of their next 6 games, and then won like 4. So
it was just one of those things where. You never. I look for a little bit of regression here too. Yeah. I'm curious to see if they can keep this going. But next up, no coach, but a quarterback who I feel like possibly has been there maybe since the beginning of the program. I don't know what year senior he is, but. It's a lot.
Well, let's just say he's number 2 on the career passing leaders for the team, and still has another year to go. But yeah, I think some kind of backdoor donor NIL deal happened to get him to go, because I honestly think he could have got some NFL interest had he entered the draft. So I think he's getting some money coming back here. Interesting to see if he'll have the success with Jamie Chadwell leaving. Tim Beck out of I think he was the offensive coordinator at NC State the last few years. So decent passing game, but they weren't that impressive. I think it's a weird hire. Like I said, I think Coastal Carolina, really built something good under Jamie Chadwell, and I we'll see if their quarterback can keep it going. But I thought they could have got a better hire.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You answered my question. I was like, I don't want to say no, because when they hired Chadwell, it was nobody knew who the hell that was either. It was sort of off the cuff, but I think their program has raised to the level where, and I don't know their finances. Maybe they can't afford to sort of go into that area where, like,
well, they're not a huge school.
Yes, like an Appy State, who we mentioned. Coaches get poached every 3-4 years there, but they always seem to make a solid hire coming in to keep that program. And maybe this guy does that. NC State's offense.
Hot and cold.
It's a more pro-style offense.
Yes.
So maybe that's what kept McCall there for.
But here's my thing. I think McCall benefited from Chadwell's offense.
I think that's where I'm confused. It's like, so we're going to take the offense that has given everybody problems. We talked about it last year on the preview show. We thought the defense would regress. It did. I'm assuming that defense regresses a little bit more again this year. So are we going a pro-style offense with a bad defense?
Yeah.
And where does that lead? I just don't know. Now, maybe they built this program to where they can continue to go, but I'm a little nervous here. And this Sun Belt is so tough. I don't know if they can sustain this without their coach. I'm curious if they fall back into 4, 5, 6 win.
I definitely could see that had their
Maybe not this year, but I think in future years.
Yeah, I don't think Grace McCall made a good move coming back here. I think you could have seen a really large regression this year, but I think they benefit because they drew Texas State and Arkansas State out of the West, which are two of the more inferior teams out of the West. So that helps their conference win totals right there and that alone. So the under at 7.5, I think is doable at the over, but not much more than that.
Yeah.
I think right at that 8-win window is where this team's going to be, and it's not. I don't think it's going to be enough to put them in competition to win the conference.
Yeah, I think so as well. I'm just curious. This is a wait and see. I don't think I'll do much betting on this team, especially early on. I'm curious how that game at UCLA comes out.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
I definitely see this as a year as App State kind of, it's been these two the last while, and I think App State can jump back in ahead of them. And I think James Madison will as well, but they can't win the conference. But I don't think Coastal's going to finish at the top.
Yeah. All right, let's move to James Madison. Win total. Quite a big jump from last year, and even last year's they sort of knew, but ended up finishing 8-3 last year. Win total is at 8.5. I think they continue to play good football. It's a little disappointing they can't win the conference. It just seems like an antiquated rule to me, especially with everybody jumping around so much. It just seems stupid to have them wait when they're clearly good enough. And I believe they would have ended up in the conference championship game last year if they were eligible.
Yes, they would have been in it, but Coastal went instead of them.
So that just seems stupid. But nonetheless, me railing against college football and how it's run, we could probably have a 2-week podcast nonstop. But once again, I look at this team to be consistently good football team like they've been. Once again, I talked a little bit about Sam Houston. It's similar. They just have been consistently good in the subdivision. They moved up, played good football, couple here and there where they didn't get it done. Depth would be the only thing that, if they get banged up, they don't have the depth to probably sustain, especially in this Sun Belt Conference. But as long as they stay relatively healthy, I think they win football games.
I think they're a very well coached team, and they've got a system there that works. I'm a little interested to see how they're going to come out. They got a new quarterback this year, new running backs and wide receivers core. So they're replacing a lot of guys, but in system teams like this, a lot of times it doesn't matter. It's just kind of
that's why I was going to say
it's plug and play.
A lot of plug and play.
I think 8 wins is very much up on the table this year, and I think they will compete for the division title again this year. Unfortunately, that means nothing for them. But if I had to give an edge between them and Coastal, I'd put them slightly above Coastal again this year, and then I think it's honestly between them and App State. Marshall may could sneak in there, but I think it's them and App State in the East.
I think so as well. I think this is, if you look at Coastal, they've had the better run the last 3 years, but if you look at their football programs overall, probably the last 20 to 25 to 30 years, James Madison been consistently better than Coastal Carolina, and I look for that to continue. I am very curious how Coastal's just going to sort of bounce after the coach leaving. I think James Madison will give you what you want. The 8.5 win total, though, I'd stay away from.
Yeah, I think the 8 window is the sweet spot.
Yeah,
I think I really could see 8 hitting. So I think getting over that 8.5 is just not going to be worth it for the even money that you're probably getting on that.
All right, we'll move to Georgia Southern. Maybe one of my least favorite coaches. Probably goes to somewhere where he probably level he belongs. I figure he can be liked by his players and run some fancy offensive plays, but manipulate the game horribly. Georgia Southern, I don't know what to make. They've been a solid program for a long, long time. Wheels came off last year. I really don't know where to sit here. Offense comes back, a lot of guys, but
made a bowl game last year.
Yeah, they did make a bowl game, but this, I don't know.
I think this is the first team. We've been discussing all these teams in the East. This is the first team underneath that line in the East. We've discussed our 4 that can compete for the title in the East. I think Georgia Southern's out of the picture there. Their offense could perform really well, but I just don't. I think it's going to be hard for them to get the talent in there.
It's sort of always think. It's always difficult. You see those top teams in the Sun Belt going to Georgia Southern, and you're like, that'll probably be a difficult game. They're going to have to play 4 quarters here, but it's sort of just going on an over-under perspective. It's can they win 2 of those 4 games where it's sitting right there for either team to win, or do they lose those 4 games and that's probably where the number is.
Well, with their total being at 5.5, I'm looking at their schedule, and on a good day, I'm seeing maybe 4.
Yeah.
So I think they're really going to struggle, and they could fall to the bottom of this division.
Yeah. So I think they could.
I think they could beat Old Dominion.
That's. How dare you? You know how I feel about Old Dominion.
Hey, 2 years ago they were good.
I think they could be as low as, if things go bad, 2 to 3 wins, and maybe they could sneak up into 8-win territory if things go right here and their offense is flowing and they're winning home games. But this is one of those teams where you probably need to watch them the first 3 or 4 weeks to see sort of what they are and where they live, and then sort of see where they go. We'll move on to the other team in Georgia, Georgia State.
Disappointing year last year.
Disappointing to say the least.
I think they were one of the highest win totals before last season. I think they were at 8.5.
Well, I think they had had a lot of guys coming back from teams that had made upsets. But I don't think I ever saw consistency out of those teams the last couple years. Coaches returning. I think he's a solid coach, but he can pull good wins out, but he seems to lose a couple games every year that he shouldn't lose.
Well, I think this team benefits, being in the heart of Atlanta. I think they can get some good recruits, some good, transfers. I think they've got some good quality 4-star guys that tried to go to bigger schools, didn't quite make the starting roster, so they came back to Georgia State. So he's got some good teams, and like you said, that talent enables them to get some upsets, and they put on quite a magical run 2 years ago to get to, I think, 9 or 10 wins actually for Georgia State a couple of years ago.
But they still didn't win the conference.
And last year that led to me. I think I took a lot of futures on this Georgia State team, and they went on to go 4-8.
Yeah.
I think this year probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
5-6 wins. Their over under is at 5.5, so that's kind of right around where I'm thinking. I couldn't be confident either way, to be honest with you. I think they're going to be middle to bottom of the pack in the East Division. And like you said, I think they're kind of in the same boat as Georgia Southern. Maybe could get up to 6 wins, but I think that's their ceiling.
I think that Connecticut game, pretty big swing game for them. See where they are. At Charlotte, you think it would probably be a win, but Charlotte wins 2 games a year randomly at home that you never expected and lose every other game by 40. This would be another team much like Georgia Southern. You hate to lump them together, but I want to see what they're doing early before I aggressively start betting on this team.
But, they're also a team that, could get a weird win against an App State or a Coastal Carolina and then go on to lose an Old Dominion game.
Yes, correct. They have talent to play with the bigger teams, but
potential to lose.
You never know quite when it comes to play and doesn't come to play. And that's why it's always hard sort of, previewing these teams, because I'm like, oh yeah, they could win a home game here versus Appalachian State or James Madison, and then I'm like, well, they could, easily go to Charlotte and lose.
Yes.
I'm like, it could be one or the other, and it's just hard to sort of go. I think they'll have solid players, but I don't know that they'll be right there. We'll go to mine, the Old Dominion Monarchs, Ricky Rain and the offensive magistry. but never a lot of wins.
They beat Coastal last year.
They did beat Coastal.
Took Coastal out of winning the. Well, they didn't win the division, but they did win the division because of James Madison.
I think I sent you a lot of texts that I love Old Dominion. I think they got beat by like 40 points and gave up like 80 the week after that. But nonetheless, I'll go ODU, an entertaining team, but not a lot of winning, and they don't return a lot of guys.
From a great team that went 3-9.
From
so
a
maybe it's a
poor-
good thing they're not returning a bunch of players.
From a poor team. I think they made a bowl game 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I look for them to be sort of hovering around the bottom of the Sun Belt as much as I sort of joke that I like them. I do like them because they are capable of, if that offense gets going, of putting up crazy numbers. But I think this is one of those poor teams in the Sun Belt here.
Yeah, I'd feel good taking the under here. I don't see 4 wins on this schedule.
Definitely so.
I don't think we need to spend too much time on them.
Nonetheless, but I will say they probably spring an upset here before you know it. We'll start out with Troy going in the West here. My boys, Troy. This was one of the big futures I won a lot of money on last year. I thought they'd be good. I thought they'd play good football. I'm not getting great value this year, but I think they come back, will be a very good team, but I think this Sun Belt, once again, will be pretty deep. I don't know if they can go 7-1 again in conference. I'd be pretty shocked if anybody can really run 7-1. I'm thinking a lot of 6-2s, 5-3s, because I think this conference is pretty deep here. What do you make of Troy? Can they keep this going here, or do they drop back a little bit?
I think one thing they benefit from is being in the West, which
Yes.
isn't nearly as deep as the East. You know, we've got 4 teams in the East, I think, that can win the division. In the West, I think it's pretty much a 2-man show with Troy and the next team we're going to talk about. But they had the best Group of 5 defense in the nation last year, and beat UTSA in the bowl game. You know me, I like the Roadrunners, so a big win over them. But they've lost some of their talent off the defense, and 5 of their wins last year were in one-score
That's
close
the other
games.
thing. They're going to play close games all season long. It's, if they can keep winning those.
Well, that win over Coastal was
Yes.
10-6, I
Yes.
believe. So they don't play pretty.
Now, that being said, they also had the win versus Appy State stolen from them with a bomb. So, it balances one way or the other. But if you get on that football thing where it loses that scale balance, and maybe you lose 2 or 3 of those, you go from having a 12-2 season, 7-1 conference title to 8-5, and everybody's sort of, why weren't you as good?
Yeah, I definitely see more potential for less wins this year than about. I don't think they can repeat what they did last year, just because I think there's going to be more teams kind of all clustered in that 8 to 10 win range, and I don't see, like you said, I don't think anybody's going to creep over that 10 win range this year in this conference.
Yeah, definitely. So. And you mentioned it in the West. They're beneficial, I'd say, from going in the eastern side where there are a lot more teams. The surprise team out of the West last year was South Alabama. I think we both lost some money on them, but I think towards the end we started to win money on them because it's one of those where we made an adjustment.
Well, they tied with Troy in the West. If they win that 10-6 game, South Alabama's going to the conference title game.
That was an ugly one too. But
well, they just needed one drive in the whole second half, and they couldn't get it.
So, I think the question here is: was last year fake because the West was so weak, or is this real and South Alabama's going to start building a program? They sit in a hotbed. I mean. People have said for years, why isn't this program better, both in basketball and in football? They never seem to get it. They finally seemed to hit something last year. Does that continue, or does it sort of fall off? I don't know, because they were good, and they were good from the start last year, too. I think we bet against them a couple times, and I was like, I've watched this team. It's actually not that bad. And then they just kept winning. So drop off, or did they sort of ascend here to the west side of things?
I love this team. I think they're going to be right there competing. I think what's the biggest thing that pops out to me, they're bringing back almost this whole team from last year. They got everybody coming back, all but two or three of their starting offense and defensive players coming back. What scares me, they've got Marshall and James Madison out of the East, which is a tough draw, getting two of the best teams from the other division. I don't think 7-1 in the conference is on the table, but I could definitely see 6-2, which could, like we said, we think Troy may come back a little bit. That could be enough to win the division and put them in the conference game. But I think they're going to be right there, especially in the West.
I think also what you think of Lafayette, we'll preview coming up here, how good they're going to be, how much they continue to drop off. I'm really curious about the opening game at Tulane. Tulane, who was a good football team last year, how they handle that, see how they go. Tough road game to start out. It's not a in-state rivalry, but in Deep South rivalry where one could boat to the other one pretty easily. We'll talk about Lafayette here. A lot of my Troy bet the year before was based on I thought they'd drop off a little bit from losing the coach and losing a lot of players. I think they dropped off even more than I thought. They got them bouncing right back. Now, I can buy that because the Lafayette program, since, the sort of mid-2000s, has been a pretty steady, solid program, bringing in good players. It's probably what you think this coach can do now. Probably 2-3 years into his reign. Can he replenish what was lost? What do you make of Lafayette? I don't think you thought last year they'd have as big a drop-off.
Yeah.
But I thought they'd have a drop-off, but 6 wins, that's really, really bad for Lafayette.
I don't know if we see any more drop-off from Louisiana this year, but I don't know if we see any growth from them this year.
Can they climb? Can they sustain with that South Alabama Troy?
I'm looking at that 7.5 win total. I don't see the over there. I think 7 is probably the cap for this team. I don't see a lot of growth here. This coach has got to make a name for himself here. I think, like you said, he's been riding off what Napier left him. What Napier left him is gone at this point. This is all his team. I don't think he drops anymore. Like you said, the pedigree of Louisiana, they've always kind of been a 6-win team or a little higher. Napier was the one that kind of got him over the top there. Now they've kind of regressed back to that bottom floor there. So I think 6-7, 7-6 is kind of the range they're going to be in this year. I don't put them up to that 8-win total. I don't think they're going to hit that over. So that's why I think the West is definitely a 2-team battle between Troy and South Alabama. That's why I'm kind of bigger on South Alabama this year. I don't think Louisiana is going to provide the push behind them.
I'm curious, how long a leash do you think they give the coach here? He was a Napier understudy. They tried to keep that going.
Yeah.
If it's bad again, is it too quick to cut the tag?
He's a legacy guy too. Played quarterback here.
It probably would be hard, but you built that program up so much. Do you cut it and go after maybe one of the retread high-end coaches who are looking to sort of rebuild their resume here? Maybe a year early. You might give him another year.
Give it another year. Napier might be wanting to come back.
Yeah, maybe so. But I am curious about that. I don't want to down them because they did, lose everybody. But I'm curious if this program can climb back up and see where they hit. They were sort of just okay on all sides of the ball, whereas when Napier is there, they dominated both sides of the line. That was gone. Southern Miss. Interesting season because I think they overachieved from what we thought they were going to do for sure.
Yeah, 2 years ago, 3 wins, moved up to 7 last year.
Does that growth continue with Will Hall here? Because I think you could say 90s, early 2000s, this was the dominant sort of small school Deep South program. even in that mid-tier, when they sort of renaissance, but then they drop back. Does this continue to grow, or does this sort of stabilize here around 6 to 8 wins?
I think, honestly, even if they stabilize here, I think this could be kind of some momentum for the program because they've, like we said, they've had some lows here lately. If they could stabilize around that 6, 7, 8 win window, that's going to be a success for Southern Miss. I've got them, actually, I'd probably lean the over. I think they can repeat this. They've got Frank Gore Jr. coming back who proved that not quite as good as his daddy, but still good nonetheless. Yes. And dominant players like that in a conference like this can really factor into carrying a team to some victories, and I think they'll get that here. I actually see them potentially finishing ahead of Louisiana in the division this year, maybe even getting as far as 8 wins. Yeah,
I was going to say this would be a value play I'm certainly looking at here for the conference win because it's
big jump.
Yeah, it's so big at 40-1.
We also think that the winner of this division could have 3, 4 conference losses.
Yes. So I don't think they're going to win the conference, but at 40-1, you're sitting there. You don't know if South Alabama is going to continue their run. Troy, you think will be there, but they might drop back off if their defense isn't quite what it was. I don't look for their offense to be elite again. And then we just mentioned our concerns about Lafayette maybe stabilizing. So maybe this team makes a jump 40-1. You get in that championship game, you can do what you want. And like we saw last year, all those teams in the East battling out, I thought, all of them were a little worn down having to play good football week to week. And Troy sort of got a cruise in there, got the game mixed up and dirty. I think value there. I don't know. The worry would be they have a really, really sort of tough stretch at Appy State, at Lafayette, at South Alabama. That's not very easy to go to. So then you're looking maybe 3 or 4 conference losses. That probably sits in and around the line.
Yeah.
2, I think, would get you the win in the West, but I think the value there 40-1. So I definitely would stare at that pretty hard. I don't know if the jump's going to be there or not. I'm curious how they go.
You're talking 40-1 odds on basically a 2-game outcome. It really hinges on that South Alabama, App State, Louisiana.
And that's how the Troy won last year.
They have to win 2 of those, you think, to be there. But that's good value for that.
Definitely so. So I'm curious to see where Southern Miss goes from here. Next up, Arkansas State. I think we were expecting a little more last year out of them, and they were really, really bad. I mean, really, really bad. I watched them a couple times. This program's just dropped off a map. I thought Butch would be able to – I don't like him as a head coach, but I thought he'd be able to at least get enough talent there to where they could win games. They looked talentless and in-game looked like a Butch Jones coach team.
His first year was actually better than last year, so they've regressed a little bit. So I think that definitely puts him on the hot seat. He's going to have to improve this year to stick around for sure.
The other thing, this is a program that expects to win. Arkansas State, that they aren't paying Butch Jones nothing. It's not some cheap program. Arkansas State, one of those Sun Belt teams who expects to have good football. They have not for a little while here. So from what I saw last year, I think this program sort of stabilizes, tops out maybe 5 wins. Maybe they could creep into 6, but I didn't like what I saw last year. I saw a little bit of quitting, too.
Yeah, bottom of the division last year, I think that has a potential to repeat itself again this year, especially, the next team that we're going to talk about here in a minute. I'm actually kind of big on maybe better than ULM, but ULM's proven they can come up and upset some people. Butch has yet to do any big upset. He hasn't made a mark on any game that they've played.
Wins are versus very, very bad.
It's been very
teams.
forgettable here.
And they haven't even been close in games where they stepped up in competition. That's the other thing. I think that's more disappointing. Basically, every good team in the Sun Belt has looked at them as sort of a get-right type game. He hasn't even been able to compete for those top-tier teams.
I definitely don't see the over 3.5 hitting here. I think at best they repeat last season. Could finish even worse.
Yeah. We'll move on to La Monroe. Bowden's still there. 4-8 last year. Continued sort of their weird. They can win games that you don't expect them to win, but they don't show up every week, every game.
Yeah.
And I think that's more the same. I think we both had them over last year. We both hit that. The 3.5, I might hit that again. I think it was 2.5.
Yeah, their over was 2.5.
So it was a little easier to hit that, but 3.5, one more win. I think they could come in and around here. I think there's enough talent here, especially out west, where they can steal a game or two. But it's they don't have any consistency, so it's just sort of hard to know totally what you're going to get. And I don't think they'll win a ton of games.
Well, this is like I was just saying. Unlike Arkansas State, this is the team that it's not weird to see them come out and get an upset and get a win that can revive their season. Now, by revive, I mean get them 4-5 wins instead of the 2 or 3. So we'll see what's happening. Army's an interesting game to open the season.
Not a lot of freebies on the schedule this year either.
Yeah, so and then they've got on the road and a couple of big SEC teams that they typically get, but college football, sometimes those weird Saturdays, and ULM's been at the center of some of those weird Saturdays. I know they've gone in and beat Auburn at least once.
Yes.
I give them an edge over Arkansas State.
I can tell you now, my strategy to take them at 35-1 versus Texas A&M will continue just because something weird might happen.
Well, Texas A&M is still coached by Jimbo Fisher, so week 3.
They brought the stabilizing force of Bobby Petrino.
Oh yes, the stable.
That'll be a fun preview show. Texas State, I think you were a little surprised this number was this low. A little disappointing, I think, last year. I think their offense could be pretty good this year, but I would think 6 wins would be a stretch, but I think they could hit around Kinney, who I talked about, those old Tulsa teams that I used to like in the late 2008s to preteen era. I liked those teams. He's shown he could coach offense. He had Incarnate Word winning football games last year, moves to Texas State. See if he can get it through. I don't know if he can quite have him ready to go right off the bat, but I think in a couple years they might be moving up the ranks here in the Sun Belt.
Yeah, I'm excited about this move. I thought this was a really good hire by Texas State. And they've got the enrollment, they've got the funding to potentially build a program here. Yeah. I think they jump Arkansas State and ULM and get almost not all the way up to that Southern Miss, maybe Southern Miss from a few years back, and maybe 2 or 3 years from now can get to that level. But I think he's going to bring in a good coaching mind with some good transfers in here. And could compete in this division. Like I said, it's the weaker division. They do get Coastal out of the East, and so we'll see what they can do. I think the over 4.5. I like 5, maybe not 6 wins. I think 6 is their cap, but I could see it happen.
Yeah, the problem I see with them is their schedule's pretty murderous. They're going to be funded, but Baylor, UT San Antonio, Nevada, that's not easy. Then you go through the Sun Belt schedule. Basically, they have one non-conference win scheduled in there in Jackson State, so that's difficult to do. And then you're going to need 5 wins in conference, and that's where the over-under gets. But I think they'll be a better football team than they were last year. I'm curious to see how this offense runs, and if Kinney can get in there and get this offense flowing. Out of the western side of things, there aren't a lot of offensive teams. Most of them are defensive based. Like we said, Lafayette, when they've been good, have been defensive based. Troy was totally defensive based. Now South Alabama was a little more balanced, but if they can be one of those teams that can score a lot of points, like a Coastal Carolina, same sort of offense run, maybe they could give some teams some problems and hit that win total over. Before we close out here, the Sun Belt. I want you to give me a winner. Who do you think's winning this Sun Belt conference here?
South Alabama.
You think South Alabama?
I do.
I'm going to go with the reemergence of Appy State here.
There you go.
All right, that concludes our college preview. I think next week, what were we doing? Mountain West and American?
Yes.
So we'll be back next week with the Mountain West and American Conference preview. And now we're going to hit up the NFL and preview the NFC East. All right, we're going to go from college to the NFL.
Professionals.
Yes. This is your first time doing NFL with us. So we're going to start out with the NFC East. There's one really, really good football team. there might be one really, really good football team in the NFC, and then the rest are battling it out. We'll get into that as we go. But let's start out with the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a lot of talent on this team.
Yes.
10.5 wins, win total, 135 to win the division. I don't know what to say. Defensively, they're loaded along the line. Pretty solid in the secondary. Maybe a little nitpicky on linebackers a little bit. Probably best offensive line in football. Brown, Smith, Watkins, Goddard tight end, Jalen Hurts at quarterback. Maybe not all questions answered, but I think enough questions answered that he can be a productive NFL quarterback. Whether he will be a top 4, I don't know, but he certainly looked very good all year last year and looked great in the Super Bowl. Bring in DeAndre Swift into the running back position, so no real drop-off from that to Miles Sanders. Is there something bad you want to say about the Eagles, or just like they're going to be really, really good?
Just pencil them in Super Bowl. We'll see. There was a lot of talk last year of the Eagles benefiting from the easy schedule, which they did have an easy schedule, and this year they're trading the AFC South for the AFC East. That's an upgrade. Yeah. They're trading the NFC North for the NFC West. That's an upgrade. So I think slightly tougher schedule this year, so we may see less wins this year. But for all the talk for their easy schedule last year, the Eagles had the best record in the NFL versus winning teams. So even when they had the tough games, they took care of business. So this is a team that's going to come out, with a mission. They're favored in every game except for on the road at Kansas City about halfway through the season. So yeah, I don't see a reason why this team can't come close to doing what they did last year.
Yeah. This is one of those that's hard to preview because basically just look at their depth chart and roster, and you're like, well, they're pretty much good at every position. Every one of their guys is one of the top-end guys in the NFL.
Can they match the program 14 wins that they had last year? The
win
best
total
record?
high at 10.5, but honestly, I
think they could cruise over that 10.5.
I could see no way where they don't really hover around 12 wins.
And barring like an injury to Jalen Hurts?
Yeah. And even then, I think it's sort of...
There's enough talent on this team. You could pencil in any backup quarterback in the league.
You saw it last year when the line started to get banged up. Even then, they didn't drop off all that much. There would have to be, I think, a lot of injuries and maybe a lot of injuries to the secondary guys. But once again, we talked about it last year. Some of the secondary guys got banged up. Their defensive line is so good that it gets pressure, so you can sort of
led
get
the
away.
league in like pass pressure. I think
you can get away with, having poor secondary guys. You might give up a couple more big plays, but you're going to get sacks and turnovers, so that sort of equals it out. Any regression maybe out of Hurts, coming in to the NFL, you probably didn't know if he was capable as a passer, but he seemed more than capable as a passer. I don't know if he's improved all that much, but he's smart with the football. He's intelligent, and I think more than anything, everybody likes him, which in quarterback, a leadership position, nobody's questioning you, and they're going to play for you. So,
we were just talking about, Super Bowl run, and he signed a deal this year that was probably less than what he could have gotten just to kind of keep this team the way it is.
So I don't know what bad to say about the Eagles.
Yeah, I think the biggest vulnerability is the secondary, but like you said, does it matter?
Yeah, and I mean, their corners are capable of playing man coverage, so they might not be great at it, but they're certainly capable of staying on them enough to give that line time to get. So I don't really know what bad to say. I think we'll have more questions with the next three teams, so we'll move on to that. We'll go to the Washington Commanders here. I think this is the one we probably disagree on the most. I think they're going to have a pretty good year.
Yeah.
I think last year I saw enough from their defense that it sort of reached the levels 2 years ago where they won the division, quote unquote. A very bad division, but I think the question comes in offensively. Hal's going to play quarterback. They got Brissett. They got Heineke still. It could be a rotating. I think your questions come here. Is Sam Howell an NFL quarterback?
Well, from his back, their offensive line is terrible.
Yes. I wasn't going to get into that, but yes. But I think, I don't want to say Sam Howell's a great runner, but he's one of those guys who can get out of the pocket and make plays, sort of like Taylor Heineke. We mentioned how people liked Jalen Hurts. People like Taylor Heineke. I don't think there'll be much call for him. I think Sam Howell's probably a little bit better quarterback. Receivers are solid, but it's one of those things where this team, wide receiver-wise, where they have like three sort of 2-3s. You know, guys who would be really, really good number twos.
Yeah.
Really high-end number threes, in Curtis Samuel or Dotson. But I don't look at any of them at number one.
I don't even think McLaurin would.
Yeah. I don't look at him as a number one.
Yeah.
I look at him as a good receiver who would be a solid 2 on take the Vikings and, put him next to Jefferson or something like that. You got a really, really good receiving core. I think a receiving core is solid. Halfback has always been a little bit random here. Gibson's penciled in, but they sort of seem to try to get rid of him every year and then always come back to him. Logan Thomas at tight end always seems to look better on paper than what executes in the game. So you're down on the Commanders this year. I think they'll be a little better. I'm a little more down on the Giants and Cowboys.
Yeah.
So what do you make of this Commanders?
Yeah, I think we're a little opposite. I'm kind of leaning Cowboys maybe slightly, or not Cowboys, Giants maybe slightly improving, but I think this Commanders team may be one of the worst teams in the league this year. They were last year, and I think their schedule gets even tougher this year. Rookie quarterback, I don't know if that's much of, he can sling it, but he's not going to get the protection. We don't have the big possession receivers. You got to have a good arm to get it to McLaurin all the way down the field when he's wide open. But defensive line, they can get a little bit of pressure, but I just don't think they're going to be able to put up points. I think they're bad all around. I think they benefited from winning some toss-up games last year, and I don't see them getting those close games this year. So I think I've got them bottom of the East.
Yeah. My fear would be being aggressive on this team is, new ownership, basically new everything in the front office ownership-wise. And if this starts slow, like the Commanders have started slow the last couple of years, and how Ron Rivera teams have tended all the way back in his Carolina days to start slow and sort of build into winning games late. If this starts slow, do we sort of get the we're clearing everything out, this is a total rebuild, let's go try to get Caleb Williams and start this thing fresh and new with a whole
They already fired their coordinator last year. If it still fails again this year, it's going to be Rivera.
That's what I wonder. But if they start well, the defense starts to build momentum. Hal looks solid enough. Gibson plays solid football. They got enough of depth with the receivers that they can manufacture enough points for this defense. That's how they won games.
Yeah. I think we could see a total rotation of all three of these quarterbacks, too, by the way.
Correct. And basically, I think that's been Washington's football life for I don't know. Well, even when they were winning Super Bowls, they were rotating quarterbacks. So basically, Washington since Washington. So I'm curious how this goes. I'm bullish on them because I just think this defense could be really, really good and then give confidence to the offense. And if they have that, basically, I think this defense could be so good that they just have to manufacture sort of 17 to 20 points like some of those old school Ron Rivera Carolina teams sort of did. But a lot of it will depend on how that comes along and the health of the defense along that line. All right, let's move to the Giants. I'm interested here. This was such a bad team 2 years ago. Yeah. Dayball comes in here, sort of turns this around. I think I'm a little worried that this sort of maybe doesn't totally revert back to 2 years ago. But they won a lot of sort of flukish games last year.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones got his money. He was in a contract year. Saquon Barkley didn't get his money, but how healthy will he be? I think the defense will come back and continue to be good. Lawrence, Thibodeau, I look for him to be even better this year. I thought he was really good towards the end of the year as a rookie last year. Dexter Lawrence, he's going to be one of the top defensive tackles in the league. I just wonder offensively, as good as Dayball was at sort of manufacturing points, once again, they did not upgrade the receivers. It's a bad receiver unit. I know they brought in Darren Waller, but are we counting on that guy? If he's healthy and right in the head, he is an elite, probably one of the top 3 tight ends in the league. But he could also be a nothing like he got for the Raiders last year. So I'm very concerned whether this offense is good. And speaking of their line, it's pretty poor as well, except for on the left tackle side of things.
Well, you're forgetting about my boy out of Tennessee, Jalen Hyatt. They drafted in the 3rd round.
Well, yes, they
set a record speed for receiver in training camp.
Yes, I watched him. He is very fast in a straight line. The problem with that is usually receivers don't just get a run in straight lines. Maybe if you're Deshaun Jackson or Steve Smith, that works, but that's like 2 out of about.
No, as like I said earlier, as much as I like the Giants better than the Commanders.
Yes.
I don't think they're a good team by any means. Don't get me wrong here. I don't think they're going to be making strides or climbing. I actually like their win total under the 7.5. I think both the Commanders and the Giants are going to be poor teams this year. But I think the Giants are. While their win totals may not show it this year, I think they're kind of trying to start the process to turn things around. They got a new GM in here. They're starting to. They did draft needs. Yes. I know you said they didn't. They actually picked up like 2 or 3 receivers in the draft, but it wasn't in the early rounds. Yes. They managed to keep Saquon for. Yeah. Another year, we'll see.
Well, I think 2 years because they can franchise him again next year. So.
He threatened to sit out this year and then ended up agreeing to play for $500,000 more. That was
doesn't ever work.
That was a weird holdout. But they, nevertheless, they still have Saquon coming out there. But they were 8-4-1 in 1-score games. Yeah. Virtually their entire schedule was 1-score games. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to Brian Daboll, and he's kind of turned Daniel Jones around a little bit, coached him up a little bit last year, and won some close games. But I think like I said, the division schedule is getting tougher this year. Are they going to be good enough to get those wins? I don't think so. I think the Commanders are 4 wins or under. I think the Giants are 6 wins or under.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm down on the Giants because I could see where they could actually be a good team. I've always thought Daniel Jones could be a good NFL quarterback. I liked what Daboll did, but there's always sort of give and take. The way they ran him last year, does he get banged up? Does he take that bad hit? I think the drop-off between Daniel Jones and then getting into their backup situation gets really, really dicey. And like I said, if Waller is Darren Waller from 2-3 years ago, you have your number 1 receiver. It's just a tight end. Waller's always been sort of a tight end / wide receiver anyway. I mean, basically, the Raiders built their whole team before Devontae Adams came in there around Waller's receiving. So if that upgrade works out, you got it there. You mentioned they draft a couple guys. Maybe they hit, maybe they don't. That's always sort of 50-50. Granted, Jalen Hyatt does run very fast in a straight line. Maybe he hits a couple deep plays, and that's what helps this team because, they didn't have those deep plays. Their deep plays became screens to Barkley, who could get outside and go. Slayton and, all these guys they're good short possession receivers. They just aren't good deep threats, so maybe a couple of those guys stretch the field. Waller becomes the number one, and their offense goes. But like I said, I worry. You mentioned all their games were one-score games. So what is their record if they're 500 in those one-score games instead? But it's just one of those where you don't quite know where it's going to go. I see the talent. I think their defense will be good. Once again, I think all three defenses in this conference are actually really, really good. Washington's, New York's, Dallas, and Philadelphia. So it'll be an interesting year. The 7.5 number probably sits in and around. I think they could probably drop to as low as 5 wins if things break wrong in those one-score games, or they can improve on last year and maybe get to the 10-11 win mark if things break right in those and Waller turns out to be a number one. Let's go to the Cowboys. This one I'm going to be pretty bullish on because I think this team's going to drop. I don't like the makeup. I talked to our friend Todd a little bit a couple weeks ago because I had just started looking at NFL stuff. I didn't realize they shipped Kellen Moore off to the Chargers, and the new offensive coordinator is, the head coach, whose offensive coordinating skills sort of give or take with Aaron Rodgers' prime.
One of my major notes was they got rid of Kellen Moore, who's probably resurrected this offense.
Yes,
shipped him off, and now that.
Schottenheimer's in there too. The son, not the father.
Now my thing is that didn't work out so well in Green Bay. What makes them think that that's going to work in Dallas?
Well, that's where I got confused here. And all the rhetoric coming out is we're going back to old school football, blah, blah, blah. We're going to run the ball out of blah, blah, blah. We didn't do that enough. And I'm like, well, this offensive line isn't what it was 3-4 years ago. It's been banged up every year for the last 3 years, and the guys, even when they've been healthy, have started to drop off. Zeke's gone. Granted, we've all liked Pollard, but Pollard's coming in off a bad broken ankle. How do we know he's going to be ready and flying off the pace? Granted, I keep getting videos of Deuce Vaughn, but as much as we love Deuce Vaughn at Kansas State, he is a very small human being. I'm not sure. Top end, maybe he turns into Darren Sproles, but, floor, he's cut by week 4 because he can't handle this. Receiver room, once again, CeeDee Lamb got better towards the end of the year. I still don't think he's a number one.
They picked up Cooks.
But this is Cooks, what team number is this?
And I'm not a big fan of getting rid of Dalton Schultz either. He was a great weapon for this team.
I loved Gallup 2 years ago, but he didn't look right last year coming off the injury, and he's one of those guys who needs said straight line speed to get deep. He's a deep receiver. If he can't get off the line and beat people, and you're scaling back the offense to a throwback style where they're going to wear down, just makes me nervous offensively. Flip that over, I do think the defense will be good. But you saw Parsons, Van Der Esch start to get banged up a little last year. They lose those guys for any amount of time.
There's not much depth on this team.
Defense starts to drop off. Same with Lawrence. It's just a lot of good players, but some guys who have been banged up, and if they go down, their defense drops. I just don't like McCarthy. Now you got him calling offensive plays. The defensive coordinator, I think, is gunning for his job. I think that's why Kellen Moore left, because they already said when McCarthy shits the bed, we're going to move you into a head coaching role. So is his eye on that? And I don't like the rhetoric coming in.
Yeah, and just bad leadership and juju come out of this team for sure. And like you said, you get an injury or two, you get a bad loss or two, things can spiral out of control very quickly, as we've seen in the past with this Dallas Cowboys team. I think they've got really solid number one units across the board, but nothing behind them. I thought it was good to get Gilmore on the second corner there, opposite Diggs. I think that's going to be good. But I think this team won the turnover battle like huge. I think they caused so many turnovers on defense. Can they get that luck again?
I think that's 2 years in a row where they've caused a bunch of turnovers.
Now,
does that flip back?
Yeah, a lot of that is that luck factor.
Yeah.
Do they get those turnovers? Do they win those games without getting those turnovers?
Especially if Dak continues. Now, he hadn't done it previously, so maybe it was an outlier, but last year he started a handful of games where some very, very weird interceptions that sort of cost them games. And you sort of saw it in the playoffs where he was great in that Tampa Bay game, flipped to that San Francisco game, weird turnovers started to happen, they got rolled.
Yeah, I think this team could flirt with missing the playoffs this year.
So I'm really down on Dallas, and I'm going to probably play a lot of unders on this team and just see where it falls. But that's the NFC East preview. We'll be back next week with, what did we say?
I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Another NFC team.
I think the NFC... Did we do Central? I think Central, maybe South. We'll have one of them, Central or South. So we'll be that way. But be sure to be back next week with our NFC preview continuing. And next up, we're going to hit into some soccer. Premier League starts next week. Ligue starts next week. So they've had, it feels like, 2 weeks off since the season ended, and we're right back to it. But nonetheless, a little soccer preview before we get out of here on this show. All right, we're back with our Premier League preview. Starts next week. Our man Dynamite David will be with us all season long, giving his bets for the Premier League and all of soccer. So be sure to get ready for that. That starts next week. Are you ready for a bunch of bets next week before we get into it?
I'm excited. It cuts down the waiting time for college football and NFL football. We got a little some action next week.
We either get a bigger bankroll to play with on college football and NFL, or we get a smaller one. It's always fun like that, but we're going to do this a little like we did last year, where we got about a $25,000 futures bankroll to play with. That'll cover all the soccer leagues. Well, not all. If you have other soccer leagues, but we're basically going to touch on the big ones and the French Ligue, but we don't have a ton there. But Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A, anything else you see out there and want to bring to the table, you are welcome to. But particularly the main fan, mostly. But let's start out in the Premier League, because I think this is the one we follow probably most closely. But let's start out. We're going to do our rankings. I ranked the teams 1 through 20. You ranked your teams 1 through 20. I don't think number one's going to vary all that different. But we're going to start with Man City. Couple losses from players this year. Granted, they bring in a handful of guys. Mahrez heads to Saudi Arabia. Gundogan heads to Barcelona. Handful of guys out. I don't know how much that's going to affect the Divas team in the league coming off the treble. I think coming off the treble,
That's the biggest threat.
You saw how much they were dragging in that Champions League game. Those guys were on fumes of fumes. But I don't think you can go anywhere and sort of not put Man City up top. We might have some other bets thinking maybe they could drop down. But I think if you're making a list saying this is how I'm going to rank them, you got to put Man City.
Yeah, you have to.
I had a couple futures in here on Man City, not a ton.
There's not much value in taking
what-
just City to win.
Yeah, I didn't
You're
see
basically
much.
going to get even around that.
Yeah.
And to win, and that's not good value.
Yeah. The other thing is it's a little trickier betting on sort of soccer futures early because the transfer window doesn't close until 3 or 4 games in. So I'm always a little cautious doing these because all of a sudden I look 2 weeks in and Man City has Kylian Mbappe or something, and I'm like, well, their transfer window's out to ends actually went a little better than it did starting today.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Kovacic comes in to sort of replace Gundogan. I don't know if it's official, but Guardiola from RB Leipzig, the Croatian defender, comes in to sort of foment that center back role. But nonetheless, Haaland back. Bernardo Silva probably back, though you hear rumors, but I think Silva will be back. Grealish, De Bruyne, all the same sort of guys. Not much value. I went a couple different futures here. Straight forecast: Man City, Liverpool plus 850, 1-2. I put $50 on that, and then a straight forecast: Man City, Newcastle, 1-2, 16-1. $50 on that one. See if I could grab one of those. Liverpool moving up. We'll talk about them as we get down here. Newcastle sort of maybe continuing to climb as they grabbed into those Champions League spots last year.
Yeah, I've got a handful of futures involving City or of City. I've got one to win Premier League and the FA Cup at plus 500. I've got $250 on that. City to win Premier League, FA Cup, and Champions League.
Whoa,
so another big year.
Another trouble.
But that's plus 2,900, almost 30-1 for a repeat on that. And I didn't see a huge drop off on this team, and I could see them doing it again. Yeah. Holland's just now probably getting into his prime.
Yes.
Could be even better this year. So $250 on that at 29-1. And then I've got one that I think is a lock. Even if they have a down year, I think they can get this 2 or more. So they just need 2 of these out of the Premier League, the FA Cup, Champions League, and League Cup. Even money on that, minus 105. I've got $3,000 on that. I think it's a lock for me to double my money there.
Yeah. Before we move on to the other teams in here, do you think that treble will have an effect on the season? I know you had talked about looking at a couple of these other teams future-wise, maybe winning the Premier League outright. Is it going to have an effect winning that treble? I mean, both you and I watched that game, and you saw how dead they were. Is there going to be an effect, or do you think they'll do their thing where they start out sort of slow, and then January ticks around, all of a sudden it's 3-0s, 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 3-0s.
I think something where a long season like the Premier League slate, you could see a little bit of a factor that may lead to them to drop a little bit. But I think the playoff stuff with like Champions League and stuff, I think they'll be able to turn their A game on when they need to. And so we may see a slow start from Man City, but I think they'll be able to finish strong. There's just too much talent on this team.
Yeah, I would say maybe if individual game, we'll start that next week, but maybe try to grab them against them a little bit, see if they have a couple down games.
May just be worth a shot.
Yeah, I don't know how healthy Kevin De Bruyne is going to be right at the start of the season. My guess is they definitely sort of slow play him in there as well, before making him full grass, because from what I read, that was a really, really, really bad hamstring pull that he had in the thing. He wasn't full bore quite yet, but not a lot of value either on Man City. You couldn't go a lot of ways. I put Liverpool as my number 2 team.
Yeah.
Odds-wise, I didn't really like it, so I didn't actually end up making a ton of bets on Liverpool because I think odds-wise they're still being bet like the team 2 years ago instead of the team we saw last year. And I don't know how much money we lost in about a 2-month stretch there where they just kept giving up lots of goals and not scoring enough. But towards the end, they seem to have found it. What do you make of Liverpool coming in to this year? Totally revamped midfield. McAllister, I'm going to butcher this, but Solza Bayol, the Leipzig midfielder, who's in there, who was really, really good for Leipzig in the coming years. Revamp the midfield. They might bring in another one. Henderson goes, Fabinho goes, Firmino goes. Curtis Jones probably steps in there, the young guy for Fabinho. Can they find that balance again? They were so poor defensively last year. But can they sort of reconfigure? They were the ones going for the treble 2 years ago. I think it had a little bit of an effect on them. Do they come back to the Liverpool we've seen the last 4 or 5
I think
years?
we're going to see a big bounce back. The offense is going to be there. They've got Salah, they got Nunez.
Yes.
They're going to get some scoring, but they're making the changes where the changes were needed to be made, and hopefully they can get a little bit of a better defense and keep possession better there at the midfield. I've got some good futures on Liverpool. I think they're definitely going to be moving back up into the top 4. I think that 5th place finish was a disappointment, although they did surge at the end and almost got that top 4 back from Newcastle. So we started to see them slightly coming back to form at the end of last year, and I think some of these changes are going to be good and help push them over the top. I'd like them a long shot to be one of the teams right there pushing City.
Yeah, I think they'll be back to their normal. I don't know if they'll be back defensively to what they were, but I think they sort of, you saw towards the end of the last year, they said, okay, we're a bad defensive team now. We just got to go score teams. So I think we're going to get a lot of 3-2s, 4-2s, not as many clean sheets as we saw, 2 or 3 years ago. I think they're going to go back to about 4 or 5 years ago where they were having to play high energy, high scoring. And I think they have that. I think Cody Gakpo might drop into the midfield a little more so they can get Nunez, Diaz, Salah, and Gakpo all on the field.
Yeah.
Slide Alexander-Arnold from that left wing
Sounds
back.
like a City lineup there.
Yeah. I think they're going to copy a lot of that. Slide Alexander-Arnold like they did with John Stones into the middle of the field where he starts spraying balls to the 2 outside guys. Nunez fills that hole in the middle. Hopefully he finishes a little better. I didn't love the odds, but I did look at leading goal scorer Nunez a little bit, but it's just hard to sort of not see anybody but Haaland taking that.
Yeah.
But I like the way they've put the midfielders in there. I think there's another move they might make too to grab another midfielder to put in there. We'll see if Jurgen Klopp can get these guys. You probably have more futures on this. I have a couple. I have win any trophy plus 115. I think that's really, really good value. You also have them in the Europa League. That might be a sneaky, or they might not care and be out of there. But you also get, the FA Cup and the Moose Cup as well in that one. I put 250 on them to win any trophy at plus 115. And then I have one player prop, Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm going to will a lot. 12 plus assist at plus 120 for 250. 15 plus assist at 430. 100. 17 plus assist, 10-1 on that one at 100. And then 20 assist at 45-1 at $50 on that one. De Bruyne got to 20 assists a couple years ago. Now, granted, I don't think Trent Alexander-Arnold does occasionally have to at least pretend to drop back into a defensive position. So I don't know if he can grab that 20 assists, but I thought 45-1 at least worth the shot. And I definitely think he could get in and around that 17 mark at 10-1. So those are my two sort of Liverpool futures that I'm going with. Like I said, I think they can be up there. You saw I put it with the Man City, 1-2 Liverpool. I thought the value was I was upset that a team that finished 5th and was giving up goals like they were being respected as like the number 2 team in the Premier League, where I thought they should have been more around that sort of Newcastle, Man United area. So what do you got here for Liverpool?
This is probably my heaviest bet I've got on futures, but it's juiced a little bit, but I think it's a solid investment at minus 140. Liverpool, top 4 finish.
Yeah.
I think it's a lock. Put it in there. I think they're definitely going to finish top 4. potentially could compete for one. I've got him at 3 in my official rankings, but I think the top 4 is solid. I've got 5,000 on that on my futures. I've got a few goal scorers off there as well. Nunez at plus 1,800. I got 250 on that, and a long shot with Gakpo at 44 to 1. I got 250 on that. I think Salah could see some injury problems. So I think this young Gakpo guy could be a big. I've made some money on him in the World Cup playing for the Dutch team here.
I think that's the only money we made in the group stages. Now, granted, we recovered during the knockout, but I think in the group stages, Cody Gakpo was our only money.
I'm hoping they play around with the lineup early and find something that they can kind of get a groove in early, and we can see a lot of goals scored.
Yeah. Next up in mine is Arsenal. I'm going as number 3. Now, their offseason, they've been really, really aggressive, really upgraded the roster. Yeah. Bring in Declan Rice, bring in Kai Havertz, bring in Jurrien Timber. They haven't lost a ton yet. The Shaka leaves, but, sort that out for Declan Rice. I'm assuming Thomas Partey goes, but that's still 50-50 up in the air. Maybe they can keep him around. I think that would be good. I know Gabriel Jesus got banged up the other night, but I think through the middle, I think they can be worthy contenders. But once again, I'm still a little worried, like last year, about depth. They got a couple injuries last year. They've improved upon that, but it's not in the area of City where City can take injuries and just put in guys who are sometimes even better than the ones they start. So Arsenal, you saw, couldn't do that. And towards that back end, when their center backs started to get banged around, they had to shuffle guys. They started leaking goals all over the place. They were still able to score goals, but they started giving up goals and having to be in those high shootouts, and that's what led to a couple results that sort of cost them that Premier League title. I think they'll continue to be good. I looked at that over-under number on the point total. I think it was at 76.5. I kind of like that. I didn't end up taking it, but I like this Arsenal team. I think if they can continue to stay healthy, love the Declan Rice ad. Curious to see what they do with Kai Havertz, because we watched a lot of Chelsea, a lot of, what should we say, opportunities present themselves with not a lot of balls blitzing the back of the net with Kai Havertz there. But I'm curious to see how they use him here, but not a ton of futures, once again, on Arsenal, because I didn't think the value was there with me as well. But what do you make of Arsenal this year?
Yeah, I like Arsenal. I had them number 2 in my projections, but I just learned about the Gabriel Jesus injury. I may drop them behind my Liverpool in my projections, but good acquisitions, good team. They can score. Like you said, they started leaking a lot of goals there towards the end of the season, but we'll see if some of these pickups can shore up some of those problems. But solid team. I think top 4 finish for sure. Can they finish as high as last year? We'll see.
That's why I'm a little worried, because I think Newcastle has improved. Liverpool will be better. We both think Chelsea will be better.
Yeah.
Man United, probably a little bit of a wild card. You never know.
Yeah.
But, so I think that's where I get a little nervous. But nonetheless, I had one future I liked for them. They had to win any trophy. So you get Champions League, you get Premier League, and you get the 2, domestic league trophies. I think they'll want to win a trophy this year. They sort of crapped out of the 2 domestic leagues because they were winning that Premier League. They knew they didn't have enough depth to sustain. Yeah. I think they'll look to try to grab one of those trophies this year. So at plus 135, I got 250 on winning any trophy for Arsenal.
I've got a couple futures, and I've got a top 2 finish at it's a plus 170. I've got 2,000 on that. I think it's going to come down between them and Liverpool in that range. So we'll see. I thought that was pretty good odds. And then I've got another weird little goal scorer / winner combo. I've got Arsenal winning, but Haaland being the top goal scorer in the league at 16 to 1. I got 250 on that.
Pretty good. All right, let's move on to my number 4 team. I think I'm a little higher. This is probably one of the ones I got the most futures on. Newcastle, I love the AC Milan defensive midfielder they brought in there in Tonell. Bring in Harvey Barnes. Really like that move off Leicester City. I think they could continue to improve here. I like this team to continue to climb up there. I think they could climb up to 2. I really think they're coached well. I loved what they do. Plus, I think at midseason, if they need to open the books, they haven't done that yet. But as you know, if they need to open the books, they can open and buy who they need because they're owned by, they're owned by money and a lot of money. So I think they could improve themselves if they're sitting there in January in and around the top spot, much like Arsenal was last year when they brought in a couple guys, Trossard and stuff, in that January window to try to maintain. I think if you're looking negative here, they're going to play Champions League this year. I think you can say maybe 13 guys, 14 guys, they got a roster that can play with those top 4 teams. But if they start to sustain injuries and start to fatigue, I don't know how much depth is there. So if that starts to come around, this isn't a team basically in 20 years that has really played Champions League football, so this will be a totally new experience for all those guys. The fans will be all in. But I'm curious a little bit of fatigued and what they focus on. How much do they focus on Champions League? Maybe just being there and getting out of the group is good for them. But
maybe that's their new priority.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Maybe they
don't get there that often.
They focus on just trying to creep into the top 4 in the Premier League and trying to make a run here at Champions League. Because I certainly think they have the talent, 11, 13, you saw them play Man City tight. You saw them play Man United tight. They certainly can play with all the teams in the Champions League. It's just can they do it consistently, now that they'll be playing a lot of 2 times in a week. Much different than playing that 1 time in a week, getting a whole week to prepare, than having to go, fly out to Barcelona, come back, play, a game 2 o'clock on a Saturday versus one of these Premier League teams, not even the top teams. Yeah. But, you run into an at Brentford having to, be in Barcelona or be in Germany playing a big-time team there. So that would be my concern. But I think this Newcastle team continues to build. I think home field is a giant fortress up there, up north. I don't think a lot of teams go in there. So I'm big on Newcastle. What do you make of Newcastle? I know you are a little bit more down on it.
Yeah, I think the added, I'm kind of like you talking about the Champions League. Yeah. I think that added stuff could make them struggle. I thought they kind of crept up a little higher than what they should have. They almost lost the top 4 finish last year to Liverpool, who kind of opened the window for them there. I think
you saw a little bit of that fatigue start to come in, even on the Premier League season, because they made those runs in the domestic cups trying to win those, and they had to play guys 2 or 3 times a week.
So we'll see. Like you said, there's still some room for acquisitions to be made. They've already made a few. But I think there's going to be a lot more added pressure and focus on them this year. Yeah. I think they're going to drop a little bit. I've got them at like 5 or 6 in the Premier League.
I'm curious where they end up.
I don't have any futures on them, though.
I got a bunch of futures, so I'll go mine. I put a $50 bet on outright winner Newcastle at 18-1. Just grab the long shot, see if it hits. Straight forecast. I also grabbed that one. Newcastle 1, Man City 2, 44-1. See if I can hit that long shot. 50-1. So if they can win the league, you're probably combo packaging, those 2 bets. Pretty good value there. Top 4 is where I'm going to try to make my money back here. Plus 155. I put 500 on that one. So try to sort of find futures. I try to find a handful of ones that cover all my long shot bets. So you break even, and then maybe you hit 1 or 2 long shot bets to put you in the profit zone. Top 6, this is where my real big money is. Minus 190, $2,000 on that one. So I'm going to try to hit that top 6, win about $1,000 on that one. There. Winner, no Man City. So you take Man City out, whoever wins the league. Newcastle's 8-1 on that one, 200 on that one. Any trophy for Newcastle at plus 250. You saw them go after those domestic cups, almost had that one versus Man United. I think they'll go after that because I think Newcastle wants a cup. So maybe we talked about don't focus on Champions League. Focus on getting one of those domestic cups. You win money there, 250. I thought that was really, really good value. 260 on that, and then over points, 67.5 for Newcastle. I'm going over at minus 110, 800 on that one. So I got a lot of Newcastle bets here. I'm thinking they improve on last year's finish. All right, let's move to Aston Villa. This is an interesting one for me because I loved what they did in the second half, really not even the second half, last 2/3 of the season. Once they brought in the new coach, everything sort of stabilized. They started making good. And if you took from when the coach came in to the end of the season, Villa was actually a top 4 team. They have more money than you think. They haven't made quite the signings I thought to improve the roster, but I think they've made a couple good ones. Diaby, who we both know from Leverkusen, who we enjoy losing money on every year. But Wing, who can get down that wing fast, not a great finisher, but creates a lot of havoc. Tillemans from Leicester City comes in there to help shore up the midfield a little bit. And Villarreal, Paul Torres, who I really, really like at center back, he helped that Villarreal team sort of bail themselves out of relegation. Really, really good center back in there. And then Wesley Moses comes back in there. I don't know if he'll stick around. He was a pretty big sort of signing a handful of years ago, but it's been disappointing. But I'm curious if he finds a spot in there. He goes back on loan. Ollie Watkins started to come in. We both started to make money towards the end of the year where we taken Ollie Watkins to goal score like every week. So I think they are a outside shot of maybe crashing into that top 4 if Liverpool's midfield isn't restructured and helps them out. They could drop back down. You mentioned Newcastle, your fears that maybe not enough depth on that roster, too many games, they start to fall out. Chelsea, we have high hopes, but it could be just as bad as it was last year. Brighton has lost a lot of guys. Brentford, no Ivan Toney for, the season here. And Tottenham, well, we don't even want to get into that. Mind you, they're pretty low on my list here. So I think Aston Villa can maybe creep in there, and if enough things break right, they could maybe climb in that top 4. I have them 5th on my list. A couple futures on there. Top 4 Aston Villa at plus 475. Got 250 on that. I got a big play on top 6 Aston Villa. I do think they will contend for the top 6 sort of spots here. So Villa top 6 plus 175, 500 on that. And then Aston Villa over the 58.5 points on the season, 250 on that one at minus 110. So anything on Villa?
Well, you're definitely bigger on Villa than me. Now, your research probably went a little bit more in depth than mine. I've actually got them dropping a little bit more. I actually took one prop on Villa, and it was a bottom half finish.
I could see that.
At 3-1, I got $500 on that.
Yeah. I believe they play European football as well, so they might have they definitely don't have the depth that the upper tier teams, but I like the way this team closed. Certainly the second half from January on, I think they could really sort of hit on that. All right, let's move to everybody's favorite team to love and hate. Interesting off-season.
Yeah.
Bring in Mason Mount off Chelsea. Add another midfielder to a team I didn't really think needed a midfielder. Got rid of De Gea. Brings in Onana from Inter. Good goalkeeper, but I'm not sure they totally needed an upgrade at goalkeeper. Striker. They just brought in Højlund for $75 million. I sent you the link on that. He scored 9 goals for Atlanta. Basically did not start the whole first half of the season, was in and out of the lineup. 20 years old. I'm not sure is quite ready to lead the line for the pressure that's going to come to him for a $75 million Euro transfer fee. I think they'll be well coached. They have a lot of talent, but I think it'll be similar to last year, where we're going to get a lot of games that we aren't going to be entertained by, and it's going to be a lot of 1-0 sort of grossness. Hope Marcus Rashford scores. Do you see any growth?
I thought they played better towards the end of the second half of last season. Rashford got on a really good run there. I've got a few props on him. I think they can put some things together. But like you said, they've got to be able to figure out how to score a few more goals and become a little bit more of an attacking powerhouse. And I don't know if they've got the pieces there. And they've already spent a lot of money.
I think they're capped. So Højlund's going to be their striker, but I'm not sold he's going to be playing every day on Manchester United. Possibly in 3 to 4 years he could be there, but that doesn't do much good on futures this year. You can try to sell me on Anthony Martial playing up the middle, but that works for about 1 game, and then he's off for about 6 with some sort of injury. So I see most the same, and I think a couple of these other teams have gotten better. So that's why I dropped him down. But, I think they'll certainly be there. But I think the odds makers have this team read right from odds I saw, because basically they didn't present any value to sort of be in that top 4 area or try to take them for champions. But
there's not really value.
But they were cautious on them and didn't give you like a big number for them to drop out of the top 4 or top 6. They could certainly see that. So I got nothing on Manchester United. What are you looking at here with Manchester United?
Yeah, I've got them moving up into that 4th spot. I think them and Chelsea potentially have the potential, just to, even if they hold par with what they did last year, fill that role from where Newcastle regresses, in my opinion. And I really like Rashford, how he came on towards the end of last year. I think he could be a star this year. And I've got 1 prop on him. Top goal scorer, 18-1. I got $500 on that.
Yeah, I think if Manchester United's going to be good, he's going to have to score the goals again. So that's the one I look at. Any other props from Manchester United?
I believe that's all I've got on them.
All right.
Sorry. I've got a long shot on them at 9-1. To win the whole thing.
Might as well go for it. I have mine on Newcastle. You have yours on United. Number 7, I got Chelsea here. I don't think any team lost us more money during the year than Chelsea. Maybe Leverkusen. It's possible Leverkusen lost us more, but I think we kept taking Chelsea to both teams to score, and I think we lost that bet quite a bit.
Yeah.
A lot of in, a lot of out.
Yeah, I think if you were awarding a championship for a team trying to win, I think Chelsea would get that because they have made some moves.
I don't even know where to start it. I think they will be better. Pochettino comes in. I think they'll be stabilized. How much better? And while they brought a lot in,
they lost a lot.
And they didn't solve the main problem, which is goal scorer. In Cuckoo, he's sort of a striker, but he's not really a striker. He likes to play out wide and come in. He scored goals for RB Leipzig, but it's not a striker. It's not a Harry Kane. It's not an Erling Haaland. We've seen this. There are a lot of guys out wide who try to come in. Shots and opportunities get traded. Finishes don't get made. And we just end up texting back and forth. Well, they created 25 opportunities. None of them finished. And we leave disappointed. But I think they can be better. I think the team chemistry. I think everything was so poisoned those last even 3 months that it just led to a bad situation. New start. I think Nkunku will get some goals. I don't know how much Nicholas Jackson will play, but I think Mudryk will come in there. We had the Raheem Sterling. He was on a bad diet last year. He's on back to his old diet. He will be scoring goals this year. I'm 50-50 on whether to buy that one. It's not Man City, it's Chelsea, so I don't know how many goals he will score, but I think they will be better, so I moved him up. I think there's a chance that they could climb in this top 4, but I didn't make a lot of aggressive futures because I want to see if they can finish goals. I think defensively they'll be pretty good because they bring the guy back from Brighton who was on loan, who's probably one of the top young center backs in the league.
Yeah, I've got a weird feeling that some pieces are going to fall together like they're supposed to this year, and they could potentially make a big jump. I've got them at 5, just outside that top 4 finish. But I did take a long shot future on them to win the whole thing at 16-1. Value was a little bit there, but I mean they're still going to need some miracles for that.
I got a couple futures on them. Top 4, Chelsea at plus 125. Like I said, their value wasn't all that great. Put 500 on that. Any trophy plus 300. I put $100 on that. I think maybe they might take a couple of those domestic tournaments because they have no European play, which is the first time in probably 8-12 years that Chelsea hasn't had European play. The last time they didn't have European play, they ended up actually winning the Premier League. I don't know if we're going to get that, but I think they might take a couple of those domestic tournaments kind of serious just to get the feel-good momentum back. So I like the value at 3-1 there for Chelsea to win any trophy. Don't know if they'll get the Premier League, but I think keep an eye on those domestic tournaments on that one. Number 8 for me, I have Brighton, and I'm interested to see where this team goes because this was such a good team. One of the teams we made a decent amount of money off of because I think certainly the first half, nobody understood how good they were.
I think they overachieved a little bit too, though.
And now the problem comes in, basically, when you're one of these small clubs that has a lot of really, really good players,
they leave.
They all leave and get bought. Now, if I was the owner of Brighton, I'd feel very good because I've made a lot of money this year. Caicedo's still there, but I'm guessing Chelsea ends up bringing him in by, either in the next couple weeks or by the end of the transfer deadline. So that great midfield of McAllister and Caicedo and those guys probably gone. Still good stuff out on the wings and through the middle, and they've always been good at talent evaluation. That's how they've climbed up from a team so small into. But I'm sort of wait and see here. My bets are sort of contradictory, but I think they could continue to play well. I love the coach they brought in there. They really even started to play better once he got in there, even though under Graham Potter they played good football, but they grew even more to scoring goals. I think that will continue. Like I said, talent evaluation has been great for them over the last couple of years. So I do have a bet top 6 plus 175, 250, but then I'm curious if the talent drain does affect them a little bit. I believe they play in Europe. They're in that Europa Conference League. That really might. They don't have the kind of depth. They do have depth, but it's really, really young. So it's not guys you're going to put in Europa Conference League games. So I'm wondering how they handle that. So I have Brighton finish in the bottom half, so 10 or below at plus 300. If that talent drains too much and they need a couple years to sort of organize, I also worry a little bit whether that coach is going to be poached. You heard his name in some of the high jobs earlier, much like Graham Potter was last year. We'll get to it, but I'm curious how long the guy at Tottenham is going to last. Maybe Tottenham goes after him. So plus 300, bottom fast finish for Brighton at 100. What do you make of Brighton? We liked them last year. Do you think they can sustain sort of this, let's go top 8 sort of feel?
Yeah, I've got them at 8 in my spot on my rankings, and I was looking at the odds for the top 10 finish and the bottom 10 finish. I don't think they're going to drop to that bottom 10. I think they're going to hang on, but the odds just weren't good enough for the top 10 finish. It wasn't worth taking a bet. I don't have any bet on them. I think they're going to kind of hang around in that slightly better than middle of the road team. I don't think they're going to make a big jump, but you said I actually kind of like your 3-1 on the bottom 10.
I think that's decent to look at value-wise.
I think if you're going to look at anything, that's going to be it. Because
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to make a big jump.
Yeah.
I think they'll be doing good if they can stay where they're
Yeah,
at.
I think so as well. Let's move to my next team, Brentford. Another one of those teams who's run extremely well. Now, this is an interesting one because Ivan Toney is out. He's such a sort of a pillar for them in the middle of the park. Another guy, Brentford and Ivan Toney, we made a solid amount of money off of betting goal scores and betting Brentford. Now, they did start to take him out of the lineup towards the end of last year, and they have good compliments to back him up. Nothing's quite like Toney. I think they can probably stay in that top 10 area because they're so well run. But I am a little bit worried of a drop-off because we mentioned it, somebody like Man United who doesn't have somebody in the middle to finish off goals.
Yeah.
Toney is that guy, always finishing them off. Anything that's hovering in that area, header, clean up, he gets that goal, he gets you that win, and maybe there's a couple more ties in there where you don't get the 3 points because Toney slipped one in there in the 75th minute because somebody, is too tired to mark him because he's been banging on him all day. So I'm curious where Brentford finishes here, but I respect their process and how they bring in guys. They're another one like Brighton who's really sort of replaced once they've lost guys.
Yeah, this is a team I've got dropping in my standings.
Yeah.
I've got them down to 12, so I didn't take the prop on them dropping the bottom half, but I think they can move down a little bit.
Yeah, I respected their thing, and I thought there was a little value here. Top 6, 13-1. That would be a bit of a reach, but 13-1, I threw a little bit of money. The top half at plus 175. I thought there was value there because you put Ivan Toney in this team, you're certainly thinking top half. So if they can replace that, I think they could finish in that. So plus 175, 250 for me. And then even if they do drop out, I think that 45.5 point total. I think they can manufacture 48 to 52 points. Just one, on their home field advantage.
Yeah.
Two, that they're one of those teams that if you are tired and don't come to play, their effort and energy is going to win them games.
Yeah.
So Brentford over 45.5 point total, minus 110, 250. Anything on Brentford that you have?
I don't have any props on them or any futures, but I've got them dropping to 12 in my standings, so I've got to...
Yeah, I ended up at 9, so
Yeah.
I'm right on the cusp. One I'm moving up is Wolves. I loved what Julian Lopetegui did. They finished in that top 10 for a handful of years there with Nuno Espirito Santos. They sort of needed to retool. They've gotten most of those old guys out that they brought in, sort of retooled, put the new guys in. I think this could go any way. They really started to play good football towards the end. Now, does that bleed over and they continue to play good football, or does that first half of last year where they really tipping point on the relegation zone, does that come into play? But I think they are run pretty well, and they got that top half. I think they could contend for the top 10 like they did for about a 4-year stretch there. I'm curious to see what this team does. I think I moved them in because I'm a little bit down on some of these bottom tier teams. I think we're going to have a little bit like last year again, maybe 6-7 teams battling who are really, really bad in that relegation zone. So I have a couple bets on Wolves here. Top 6, 50-1. I don't know if they'll go, but 50-1. They finished top 6 a couple times under Espirito Santos. So I do think there's a chance there. Only $25 on that. The one I like is the top half at 6-1. If they can finish in that 9-10 spot, I think there's a chance there. $50 on that one. Anything on Wolves?
I've got them kind of just hovering around where they were this past year. I've got them at 13. I don't think they're going to break through and get into that top half, but I don't think they'll fool around with too much
Yeah.
with the relegation area. So I think they're going to be just good enough to kind of stay safe.
Yeah, I think that's where they are. And then if they have a little run there where they win some games
Yeah.
and a couple of the teams fall back, they could grab that. That's why I like that sort of 6-1 hitting there. Maybe things just break, and you never know towards the end, too, when teams are safe and start resting guys and not
Yeah.
resting guys. Maybe they jump into that top 10 based on nothing. 11 for me, West Ham. I don't know what to do here. They ended up winning the Europa Conference League, which weirdly then qualifies them for the Europa League. So they will be playing European football once again, though they were terrible in the Premier League. And we talked about it a little bit, how when you start playing European football, that taxes your depth. I thought it really affected West Ham. You take away Declan Rice. I think this could be dangerous again. I don't think they'll take the Europa League as serious as they did the Conference League, because I think they thought they could win it. I'm a little worried about West Ham here. Now, they do have some players, but I don't think we're going to see West Ham where we saw them 2-3 years ago, where they were sort of making a move to try to fish that top 6. I think they'll be back in.
See, I've got them a little higher than you. I've got them more or less just filling the void of teams coming back.
Okay.
So I've got them up to 9.
yeah.
So I'm taking West Ham top half finish at plus 135, but more or less just for them being able to kind of stay right around where they were, and moving up a little bit due to other teams coming back. I think they're solid enough to compete and get some draws in games where they shouldn't be, and just to get enough points to kind of stay up there.
Yeah. I got no futures on West Ham. I wanted to see what they looked like early, to see if they've sort of balanced themselves out, or, are playing like they did last year. This is one to sort of star. I think if they get off to a slow start, the coach is probably going to go.
It could fall apart.
And then once you start replacing coaches, you might get the one that brings you in and starts winning you games. You might get the one that you have to fire 3 weeks later and bring in another one. At 12, Fulham. This one was a little weird because I'm assuming they brought in Raul Jimenez, striker, because I'm assuming Mitrovic ends up going to Saudi Arabia. If Mitrovic is there, I think this Fulham team could be similar to what they were last year in that 8-12. Mitrovic leaves.
I've got a big drop on them.
I'm getting a little nervous that they drop.
I've got them at 14 in my standings.
I put him at 12 because Mitrovic is still there right now. But I'm pretty sure he's going to leave. Jimenez has not looked right since, his skull has been cracked, which, granted, once the top of the head starts to be broken, I don't know.
He's in the older range, too.
And he's starting to get older, so I don't know if he can replace Mitrovic's. He was one of those where you knew he'd fill that void in the middle, and he's one of those who sat there and banged defenders, and nobody liked playing him.
Yeah.
So if Mitrovic sticks around, I think Fulham probably pretty safe in that range. If he's gone, I look to him to be more in your territory, and they might fall into that relegation zone. But good year last year. They got some nice surrounding pieces, but I don't know quite where to place them quite yet. Then we go to Tottenham. I have them 13. It's hard to gauge this till you know what Daniel Levy's totally going to do here with Harry Kane. I'm guessing Bayern ponies up.
Yeah.
We'll get to Bayern and whether they will pony up, because if Bayern brings Kane in, I think we start to talk Champions
League, yeah,
with
for
Bayern
sure.
Munich. If they don't, I think we get similar to what we got last year, where one game they score 6 goals, the next game they're struggling to score 1 goal. We never quite know which lottery we're going to get. And take Kane away from Tottenham. Honestly, I think offensively they probably will be okay. You slide Charleston in there, Son, Kolashevsky. They might buy another striker, But I think we got to once again go, how are they going to be defensively? Because I don't know how many times we were like, let's bet on Tottenham, and then you sent me a message 3 minutes later. They're already losing 1-0. They bring that coach in from Celtic. He's been good. He's an Australian coach everywhere he's gone. But this is quite a jump from going sort of the Scottish Premier League, where Celtic is one of the two teams who basically have all the money and nobody else can compete. So even if you aren't a good coach, you won't really know it because you're going to finish 1 or 2 no matter what. So it's hard to judge. There are a couple futures. First coach fired where if there's no Kane, I don't think Tottenham will be patient, fans-wise, will be patient with a coach out of Australia that they know nothing about, who's I want to say a little quirky, and I'm assuming they're giving up goals.
Well, I've got Tottenham higher on my board, which, I follow them closer than most other EPL teams. I got them at 7. They got something going for them this year.
Yeah.
No Champions League.
Yes, that's correct. I
think they're going to be able to focus on righting the ship this year, and I think they're going to be able to perform it and not get quite up to the edge of top 4, but I think they're going to stay in that top 10.
Yeah, I think you'll get a better year out of Son, too. I think there was, coming into the year with the World Cup, and
he had a lot of pressure on him in the World
Korea,
Cup. Yeah,
the World Cup. I think he was fatigued.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be better this year. They bring in Madison from Leicester. Granted, speaking probably the perfect Tottenham player. One game he looks great. The next game you don't even notice he's on the pitch. It's probably Tottenham's calls. Defensively is where you worry. I don't think they brought in another goalkeeper from Imperioli. That is an upgrade from what we had last year, but it wouldn't be the level of a sort of a Premier League top 6 team that I would expect. I would expect at least a top 15 goalkeeper, and we're probably talking top, to be nice, maybe top 30, top 45 would be. It's an upgrade from last year. I just worry defensively what they're going to be, and then no Kane. It's just weird. So
I do think though, if Kane goes, that does free them up to maybe make a big time move.
The problem I worry with that is they're doing what Tottenham always does, which is basically wait till the last minute, sell Kane, and then
have nothing there.
Have no time to go and buy.
Or the everyone available good is gone.
You're the last week and you're throwing around for a random striker. But I do have one bet, bottom half, Tottenham plus 500. I thought there was decent value in that if they pull a Chelsea and totally.
Yeah, they were overvalued on any of the higher just because of the popularity.
Touching any of the top 4 type value there.
I think odds wise they were 6th favored to top 4, so it was kind of overvalued.
Yeah, I not touching that. 14, I put Burnley in here. Vincent Kompany, I loved what he did with them in the championship. One of these championship teams always sort of finds a way to bounce themselves. I don't know if they'll climb in the top half, but I think they'll be a good football team. The ownership in there has spent pretty good money to sort of secure this team and stick around. They were one of those teams that stuck around in the Premier League for years before they dropped off the mat 2 years ago. I sort of like Burnley to be that championship level team that'll sort of climb in here. So I have Burnley top 6, 32-1. I don't know if they'll do that, but a couple of years ago when Sean Dice brought them in here, they did climb in that top 8 area off the championship, so maybe they can make that run again. Not over optimistic, but 32-1. Take a shot at it, maybe you hit it. Top half is the one I'd really go for, 470. I think there's a chance maybe if, Wolves drop off, your Villa drops off, Tottenham is bad, West Ham is bad, maybe Burnley sort of sneak their way into a couple wins there and climb into the top half. 470, $50 on that, and then Burnley over 39.5 points. I think usually the cut line is about 38. I think Burnley will be well safe, so 43 points. So I think that's pretty good value. 39.5, 250 on that.
I've got them down flirting with relegation down here. I've got them at 16, so barely safe.
Yeah, I from about 14 to where I have these teams, I'm thinking any of these
It
teams
could get ugly.
drop. I think they will be better, but any team I'm mentioning now, I think definitely we could be seeing in the bottom three. Now, I think there's one team that definitely is bottom three, and the five probably are battling it out for terrible football played for the first 4 months of the season, and then we all pretend like they're all of a sudden going to get it together and start winning the game. So we've had 5 months of evidence that they're terrible. So Sheffield United, the other promoted team, they've sort of been in and out. These two teams, Burnley and Sheffield, were both pretty much dominated in the championship, which you'd expect because they were pretty solid Premier League teams for a couple years there. Go down, bounce right back up. They haven't made the moves that I thought they would to secure their place, which has me a little worried that maybe they're taking the payment, bounce back down, win the championship, bounce back up, just collecting checks. But these bottom teams, I just don't think they're very good. I think Sheffield's better than them. So I got a couple futures on it. Avoid relegation, Sheffield United 250, that's even money. And then Sheffield United over 31.5 points. I thought that was pretty low. Even if they get relegated, they probably can get to 35. So I put 400 on that. Anything on Sheffield?
Nothing. I've got them getting relegated.
They haven't done much.
I've got them going right back to Championship League, but we'll see.
Yeah, they might be one that comes in a little late, see if they could get a couple, bargain guys off those top tier teams who aren't going to sort of be in the rosters to fill it out sort of the way, well, I shouldn't say sort of the way Nottingham Forest did it. They basically spent from the moment they bounced up.
And they're barely hanging on.
Until the moment they did. That sort of continued here. They got a lot of names. I don't know a lot of quality. They're my next team leading into this. I got no futures on them. I think they'll sort of be what they were last year. Solid at home, terrible on the road. Enough good players to where they won't be absolutely, plummeted at the bottom, but I think they'll certainly be in a relegation fight. Anything out of Nottingham Forest?
I've got them at 17. I did take a little bit on Forest relegation at 220.
Yeah.
I thought that was decent since they're going to be right there on the edge.
Yeah.
And I put 500 on that.
Yeah. They have dudes. They continued to buy this year too. So I just, they didn't look good. It seems like a roster of, well, we'll just put together names. Hopefully we'll survive. Yeah. But it didn't have much cohesion last year. I don't know if it'll have much cohesion this year. Next is Crystal Palace. They closed well, but I'm very confused what they were doing. Wilfred Zaha ended up leaving, going to Galatasaray, who's probably their best player. Now, a couple of the young kids came in, but, they went young, coach-wise. First year they did all right. Petra Vieira then was, I don't want to say bad, they just sort of tuned him out and fell into relegation. They ended up bringing back the old man, and then they're bringing him back again this year, and I don't know how that works. He was 2 years ago when he retired, out of forced retirement. They were battling relegation zone. Now they sort of overturned this roster where it's a more young roster, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they're battling around in the relegation zone. So I don't have much. I put one future on them, relegation, Crystal Palace 6-1. I thought there was decent value there. Certainly if Roy Hobson isn't ready to, sustain the whole season, or they get off to a slow start, it just, something seems weird about a team out of London that has pretty good money and just they seem content with being 13th or lower every year, which seems fine except for the part where maybe one year it doesn't.
And you fall too far.
You end up down below. So
I don't have any props on them.
Yeah.
I do have them finishing a little higher than you. I've actually got them just outside the top 10.
Yeah,
So.
which is where they live.
Yeah.
I think they finished 12th, like 10 of the last 12 years. But yeah, relegation 6-1. I thought there was value there. Next up, Everton. Their roster's a mess. I don't know what to do with them. They've been battling relegation. They don't have a lot of money. A lot of in, a lot of out, but it's a lot of bad in and a lot of bad out. Dele Alli's back. Hopefully he can sort of refine his career here, but I think they're going to be in a relegation battle again this year. I don't see a lot of promise. Coaching-wise, maybe a little bit of an upgrade, but they're going to have to win games ugly, and it's not going to be fun to watch. And maybe they do just enough, but I think they're going to be sort of hovering around the same way they've been hovering the last couple of years. They've been able to, on that last 2 days, they've been able to stay alive. But I think that 3-1 relegation worth a shot too at $100 for me. Anything on Everton?
I don't have anything on them other
than don't watch them. Last two, Luton Town. Fun story. They tried to bring some guys in, but they just don't have the money to bring
they're
guys.
They're going to be playing in some weird interim.
We don't even know where they're going to be playing. They're going to their home isn't going to be their home. I think maybe they get it together. I'd be very, very shocked if they could stay out of the bottom three. They don't have the money. They don't have the roster to compete. I think there's a big drop-off.
Unfortunately, there's no value on betting them to be relegated.
The only thing I could say is if they can get the home stadium, some of these very rich teams are not going to be happy playing in basically what is an AYSO pitch out there. I see no way they aren't in the bottom three. Anything on Luton, I couldn't do anything.
No, there was no. I mean,
once again,
unless you think they survive,
that would be if you think
to
they can
avoid
survive,
relegation. There's some value there.
Probably grab, but
I don't think there's a chance.
They made that run towards the end. They weren't even really one of the top teams in the championship play all season long. They just had that good run. I mean, they're going to get a boost here off the payment, drop back down. Maybe they can bounce back up. But it'll be fun to watch the home games there. But I think this is going to be fodder for everybody. I think the other thing is these other bottom teams we're talking about. They all have to pencil this game and say we got to get.
They got to win this. Yeah.
Last for me is Bournemouth.
Yeah. Value here.
I think we all thought Bournemouth were going down last year.
Yeah.
They ended up playing really good that second half of the season. Once again, they made a couple roster moves that I thought, but I don't think it's vastly that different. There, a couple of guys still might be on the move from them too, going to other teams that were good last year. I think they'll be more in the relegation zone than what their value is. I'm grabbing relegation Bournemouth plus 240. I hammered 250 on that.
I got 500 on that.
I think they will be there.
I'm with you.
I think they caught a nice little thing, and there just happened to be a lot of really, really bad teams in the Premier League, and they sort of caught wind, and they were really bad. But they just happen to not be as bad as some of those bottom ones were playing. I'm curious if they can sustain that this year. So, Bournemouth relegation plus 240. Anything on Bournemouth?
Yeah, I got the same bet. Relegation plus 240. I got $500 on that.
All right, that concludes our Premier League preview. We're going to hit up a quick French League preview. There's not a lot to bet here. Granted, PSG might not have Mbappe. Messi's already gone. Technically, Neymar's still on the roster. He's probably going to be on the team because no one's taking his wages and no one's buying him. Sort of a miracle. He doesn't seem to want to play in Saudi Arabia, which is the obvious place for him to go. But he seems to be one who still wants to play real football. Nonetheless, so I got a couple. Lens, who Liens, I should probably say, should I speak with my French vernacular or my English vernacular? I really like the way they play. I think they can make another jump this year. They brought in a couple guys. I liked the Diouf out of Basel, who I watched in the Champion League. Really like him, bring him in. They did lose one or two guys, but I think they'll sustain. Just like the way that's run, I think they can. My big bet is them in the top four, plus 115, for $200. I have them at winner, 20-1, because I think there's an off chance PSG might be a little down this year, so it might open small window. I think Lyon will be down. That's two teams I'm looking at in the French league to jump are Monaco and Lyon.
Well, it's like all the news you're hearing about PSG right now. What is it? It's just where's Mbappe going?
Yeah.
What's happening with Mbappe?
Correct.
That's a big distraction.
So if they don't, I think so. 20-1 Lyon's winner, $50 on that. No PSG winner. I think there's better value on that. Plus 450 on that one, and then top four plus 115 for Lyon's. And then Monaco, I got top four plus 115. They would be another one on the no PSG winner I'd look at. Really like. I think they'll have a pretty good team this year. Lyon's lost a couple guys. I think they might be a slow start now. Usually they find their way into that mix. Marseille always comes with a lot of bluster, and then they usually lose a couple games here and there. Lille should be pretty good once again, but not a ton on the French league. Anything on the French league with you? I know it's not one you pay attention to all that much.
Yeah, I don't have anything on the French league. I'm sorry.
You also don't have the BN Sports, I think, which is where all the French league is played. I still have the BN Sports, so I pop in a French league game during the afternoons occasionally. I do have some French League 2 bets for you. A couple of the relegated teams I thought were pretty good value. So I got Bordeaux, Saint-Étienne, and your favorite, Angers. We'll use the French vernacular and call them Angers. But Bordeaux at plus 500 to win League 2. They're actually head and shoulders above most of these teams. It's a pretty big program. I think it was a pretty big shock. They got relegated last year. They don't belong there. I think there's a good chance. So I put 250 on them at 5-1 to win League 2. Saint Etienne sort of does the jump in, jump out, jump in, jump out. Mm-hmm. At 7-1, thought good value at 100 there. And then I thought Angers played pretty well last year and just missed that cutoff point of dropping off. So 9-1 I thought was pretty good League 2. So I put 100 on that for French League 2 futures. Sort of pay attention to that. But that rounds up anything else on Ligue. Touch on anything?
I don't.
No. He'll have more in depth for La Liga and Bundesliga. Not a lot of French League watching. And Syria. But I had a couple in there. Watch Lyons, watch Monaco. Those would be my sort of sleeper teams to pay attention to, see where they go. Because I think Lyon will be a little bit down, so maybe these two can climb in there. But you know who's going to be the dominant team in there. Mbappe, no Mbappe. Even if they lose Mbappe, they're just going to buy like a Dusan Balic out of Juventus. They already brought Ousmane Dembele off Barcelona in there. Like I said, Neymar is still on the team. Maybe without Messi and Mbappe, it becomes Neymar's worlds. So I don't look for PSG to drop that much. So it's not all that interesting to preview the French League. But I think that wraps up the show.
Yeah.
Touched on a lot.
A lot around the world.
Next week with college football preview, continue the NFL preview. I think we're going to hit up, La Liga and Serie A.
And we'll have some Premier League bets to make.
And our soccer betting starts.
Yeah.
So we'll have some, maybe even some NFL preseason. Maybe you want to dip into a little preseason action. Maybe not. Anyway, that's our show. Be sure to like and subscribe to all our shows. We're going to have a whole bundle of stuff coming at you in the next couple weeks. Our betting will start next week. More previews to come for all the soccer, NFL, and college football. That's our show, and we're out.
This is Stapleton Airport information, Mike. Wind at 320 degrees at 6, temperature 5.
Strip's where I'm gonna land. Only the word is crash.